Raiders. Plumb the depths of their experience to make sense of a world gone completely insane. Subscribe for the word. Like and leave a comment. Stranger by the Hour.
Welcome back to Stranger by the Hour, everybody. It's going to be episode 88, and we're coming at you 13 April, in case somebody finds this like in a time capsule or something. And we got another guest for y'all, and it's another one to be excited about because this is Scott Ritter. And we're going to be pretty quick with Scott's interview. He's a published author. He's a retired Marine, UN weapons inspector that pretty much told everybody that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So in respect for his time and everybody, to get to the questions, we're just going to invite you to look at his background and his body of work on your own time. And Scott, we're going to give you a elevator pitch on what we used to do in the military, just so if you end up using any of this, or folks just kind of know the bona fides of these weirdos that are asking you questions. So my name's Cody Anderson. I joined the Marine Corps in 1998 on a security forces infantry contract. Graduated January of '99. Went to the School of Infantry in Camp Pendleton to be graduated as an 0351. From that training, I started my security forces pipeline. So I went to Chesapeake, Virginia, became a basic security Marine, not to be confused with an embassy guard, different job for the folks out there. Security forces are more like different facilities than your embassy guards, more like strategic facilities, which kind of leads me down that whole nuclear weapons program. So after I graduated from that, my first duty station was Naval Submarine Base Bangor, which I was part of the guard force there for the strategic weapons facility. Did that for a couple months and decided it was really ridiculous and volunteered for the CQB team they had there, which was considered a recapture tactics team to recapture any compromised national assets. So these would be like broken arrow, bent, whatever the hell the terminologies were for if they ever lost control of a nuclear weapon. So from there, I went back to the straight leg infantry of 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines Kilo Company, where I started as the platoon commander because we were so low on bodies as a sergeant. I think I was 23 maybe at the time. I forgot, 22. Did a stint as the platoon sergeant, invaded Iraq in 2003 as the Kilo Company assault section leader, left in the advance party because I'd already scored orders to EOD school. But all that got shut off because of the war. Graduated EOD school in March 2004. Went to 3rd Platoon EOD in Okinawa. Got sent from there to 31st MU, where I invaded Fallujah the second time for Phantom Fury. So I'm a Phantom Fury vet. Came back. I was supposed to be doing some downtime at Miramar as just an air wing bomb tech. While I was there, MARSOC was standing up going into 2006. I'm refurbishing a cabin, so occasionally creatures might fly in here. 2006, they started scouring the ranks looking for who would be good for MARSOC. I was EOD tech with an infantry background with 2 combat tours with a V attached to them. So I got the bump to be part of the initial tranche of Marines that went to 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion. I was the first of 3 EOD techs to 1st MSOB. I was joined up with Aaron there in Alpha Company 2006 to basically into early 2008. And then I did 2 deployments for Bravo Company as their EOD chief. So Raider EOD chief for Bravo Company. From there, I went to the dark side, went to TBS and became a warrant officer. And I was given 2nd Raider Battalion EOD as my first boot ass officer. Hey, here's a special operations bomb tech team as your first job. So I deployed with 2nd Battalion as their EOD officer for a battalion deployment to Afghanistan. So that brought all my Afghan tours to 3. And left the Marine Corps in 2016. Got picked up on the job Aaron was doing for that place that we were talking about a second ago, working essentially sensitive activity support, psychological operation support, military deception support, and the use of technology such as special access programs and ACCMs, alternate compensatory control measures, in support of sensitive activities, psychological operations, and military deception. And then I quit, walked away from all that shit stone cold, bought a cabin and a farm with that beautiful dude right there. I'm out.
All right. So Aaron Brandfast, I have a pretty similar background. I joined the Marines in 1993. I was an infantry machine gunner with 1st Marine Regiment. My first combat tour, I was in Somalia very briefly, but it was long enough to get a combat action ribbon. We covered the UN withdrawal from Mogadishu, so this would have been after the Army had their famed Black Hawk Down deployment. This is I think it was about 2 years later. I think it was around 95 we did that. I ended up in the Scout Sniper platoons in the 1st Marine Regiment. Got out for a couple years, and then after September 11th, I felt called to come back in, and so I came back to the 1st Marine Regiment, this time to 2-1. Participated in the invasion of Iraq in 2003 as a Scout Sniper team leader, and then I was working. I took a job as an instructor at sniper school because I thought the war was over, because I saw George Bush stand on that aircraft carrier in his pilot outfit and tell everybody we won. So I figured, all right, well, I'll take an instructor billet, kick my feet up a little bit. But then the war kept waging, and I wanted to stay involved. So I took the screener. I went to Force Recon, and was at Force Recon long enough to kind of get trained up and all that stuff. And then they SOCOM kind of waved their magic wand and said, this group of Marines here are now part of SOCOM. And so I was grandfathered in to as one of the founding members of the Marine Special Operations Command, and that's where I met Cody in Alpha Company. And then I spent the rest of my career as a MARSOC guy, retired in 2016, and then immediately went to work as a contractor doing those sensitive activity support jobs that Cody was talking about. I actually am now almost officially done with all that. So the end of this month will be my last day at work. So I tend to be pretty careful about, and I know you are too. I've listened to some of your content about, hey, look, I'm never going to break my agreements with the government or my personal honor and spill the beans on anything. So let's all just keep each other honest. If we start to get the runaway gun going about some of the stuff we know, I think we're all pretty skilled at keeping that under wraps. So that's me. Scott, would you mind giving us like your background up into and including your stint as a weapons inspector and how that all came to be?
Well, goodness gracious, my life's going to be boring compared to what you guys have gone through. I graduated college in 1984. I had gone through the officer candidate school program, so I got my commission upon graduation and went to the basic school. And the interesting thing about that is during a MOS selection, when I walked around, everybody, of course, wanted infantry, or if you couldn't get infantry, get some sort of combat arms. But I wandered over to the intelligence guy and I said, "What do you do?" And he basically explained it, and the answer was everything. And I went, "I want to do everything." He said, "Well, you can't do everything because you're just a lieutenant and you know nothing." And I said, "Well, actually, I studied Russian history. I speak Russian, and I've published a couple articles in some of the world's most elite scholarly journals on this kind of stuff. I think I could be an intelligence officer." He said, "Well, then write a letter to the Commandant of the Marine Corps." And I did. And so I was the first intelligence officer, 0202, accessed into the Marine Corps as a second lieutenant, which was sort of cool, except the Marine Corps didn't know what to do with me because normally at that time, to become an intelligence officer, you had to have 3 to 5 years experience in the fleet, preferably in combat arms, and then you could be you could lat move in.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the way it was done in the old days. And so, generally speaking, you were a captain with at least one tour, probably 2 tours in the fleet under your belt, and then you'd lat move over to the intelligence field. And the bad thing about that is it meant normally you got the guys that didn't make the grade in their primary MOS, and so the intelligence field had a pretty I won't say it had a great reputation, especially amongst the junior officers. And that was one of the things I'd always fight about that. But I got sent to 7th Marine Amphibious Brigade. That was the rapid deployment force at the time, and our job was basically literally to have you guys know this. You just have a ready bag by your bed, and we didn't have pagers back then. But if the alert went out, you picked up your gear and you drove the expeditionary airfield, and off you went. Fortunately, that never happened. Because that would have meant sort of a big war, and we were, even though we talked big, we weren't really ready for for big war back then. That was one of the things I learned about the Marines, that we were ready to fight World War II. We were ready to fight Korea. We were ready to fight Vietnam. We weren't ready to fight World War III. But after I was supposed to, they wanted me to go to an infantry unit, but because you get the scout sniper, and then you get the platoon command, you get command billet, and for an intelligence officer, that was important in order to get brought into the regular as a regular officer. I was a reservist, but instead, 5th Battalion, 11th Marines fired their third consecutive intelligence officer for incompetence, and I was tapped to go down there, and they basically said, "Well, enjoy your time in the Marine Corps, because this is it. You're never, you won't survive 5/11." I showed up on day one, and I met my staff sergeant, good guy, Scott Copus, fantastic Marine. He was a sergeant at the time, later became a staff sergeant. And I said, "Well, what do you do here?" And he said, "Well, don't ask me to tell you. Why don't you go to the 3 shop and ask the master guns to tell you?" So I walked into the 3 shop, introduced myself, and I said, "I need to know everything I can about artillery so I can support you." And he started signing me up for courses, FDC course, all this kind of stuff. And I went back to my office, and all of a sudden the door opens up. Remember, I'm a brand new second lieutenant. I've got hardly any time in the fleet. And the door opens up, and here comes this grizzled major with his Vietnam era campaign ribbons and his Bronze Star with the V and the Purple Heart. He is God's gift to everything. And he is chewing my butt off. "How dare you step into the 3 shop? You don't move in this battalion unless you go through me." And I stood up and I said, "This is like the end of my career here." I said, "With all due respect, Major, shut up." I said, "I'm a staff officer. I'm the equal to you in the eyes of the commander. You're in my office, so you will address me with respect." And I said, "No, that's not how it works." And I haven't met the battalion commander yet. I haven't checked it. I literally went there. All of a sudden, the XO comes in, Major Kibler. He says, tells the 3 to come into his shop. I hear yelling and shouting. And then they walk across the door to the battalion commander's office, and I hear yelling and shouting. And then the 3 stumbles off. The XO comes in. He says, "I think it's time you meet the commander." I said, "Okay." They just fired the S3. They just fired him. Boom, straight up fired him. I came in and I said, they said, "Okay, I reported as you normally do." Lieutenant Ritter's for this officer. And he said, "Okay, stand at ease." He said, "Okay, so you're an intelligence officer." I said, "Yeah." And he says, "What's your experience?" I said, "Well, I just graduated from the school." He said, "Oh, good. So you're a smart intelligence officer." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, tell me about intelligence. What's it mean to you?" And I gave him the school solution. I said, "Sir, intelligence drives operations." He goes, "Do you really believe that?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." And he goes, "Good. I just fired the 3. You're in charge of preparing the annual training plan. Go." And I walked out and I said, "Well, what does that mean?" Well, there was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I suddenly took a look at what we were doing. I realized we were fighting World War II. I went to the FDC school, and we're doing the same worksheets that they were doing back in the 1940s for, preparation of fires and all that kind of. I'm like, "No, this is wrong." So I went to the battalion commander. I said, "We got to change these." He said, "You're in charge. Do it." And I basically went to Fort Irwin, went to the Op 4 people, got them to teach me about how the Russians fight. I got my commander to come with me and watch it. And we came in. We were in the major attack, the last attack, when literally 200 vehicles are overrunning the army, and just did it. They won that quick. And I turned to my boss and said, "That's us. All those dead soldiers there, that's us. If we go to war, we're doing." He goes, "Fix it." And so, as a lieutenant, second lieutenant, then a first lieutenant, I basically transformed an artillery battalion into something that could fight the Soviets in a stand-up fight. And I'm pretty proud of what I did. I'll give you an example. I started using air a lot, because I said, we got to use air to supplement. This is combined arms warfare. So I'd go down to the air, the monthly air meetings where they sit there, and it's peacetime. And so nobody's going there. Nobody wants to do any work. It's a peacetime Marine Corps. And so if you don't bid for the air, then the pilots just drill a hole in the skies to get their flight hours. So I went down and I said, "How do you guys like to come in and practice suppression of enemy air defense?" I said, "I need you to come in, big sky, little bullet. We're doing live fire. We're going to do it like it's real. We're going to combat. This is maneuver warfare. This ain't static. We're moving against an enemy. And they're like, sign us up." And then I'd go to the tank battalion and say, "I need you guys to come in, and we got to practice coordinating, assaults, all on an enemy, practice flexible defense, all this kind of stuff. Got the LAVs. Next thing you know, my battalion exercise became a division exercise, but it was a battalion exercise. And the commander of the Pacific was looking at the things. He goes, "Why do we have 100 aircraft over 29 Palms?" So, well, he goes, "What exercise am I missing?" They said, "Well, it's a battalion fire X." So what the hell? I got called in front of the command. Well, it was a 3-star. I had to explain what I was doing. I said, basically, we're learning how to fight a war, and we did. I left there. That was the best job I ever had. I have to tell you straight up. I did things. I mean, I'm not bragging, but RPVs were flying then. My battalion is the first battalion to do adjust fire missions off an RPV. And this is before GPS. So we're talking dead eye adjust fires, looking at a map, looking at the computer screen feed. And
is that is that a rocket propelled artillery? Is that what we're talking about?
No, our RPV, remotely piloted vehicles, call them drones today. So it was the early pioneers.
Gotcha.
The early pioneers, yeah. One of my big claims to fame is, again, my staff sergeant is a great guy. And I wanted to have rapid counter battery capability. So he had served in Beirut. He was the battalion that came in after the Marines got blown up. But he talked about how they had Army Q-36 batteries, or the radars, and how they were linked, how the radars would detect an immediate link to the battalion, the battery command system, BCS, and we'd get fire on the targets immediately. And I said, well, do we do that now? Why aren't we doing that? He said, no, that was a unique setup for Lebanon. I said, no, we need to do that. So I went to the Defense Logistics Agency in Mojave, California, and we walked around there. I just walked in because I'm a lieutenant, and that's what lieutenants do. We do whatever the hell we want. And I said, I need these radios. I gave the specifications, and they took me to a warehouse, and there they are. And we just started throwing them in the back of the Humvee. I signed for them. And then I came and I said, well, I went to the Q-36 guys, and I said, how do I get this to talk to you? Because they're incompatible. And there's a place called McTissa, I think, up in San Diego, up in the mountains, and they do electronics. And I went to them and I said, make this talk to this. So on what authority? My authority. I'm Lieutenant Ritter. I'm a Marine officer. You must do what I tell you to do. And they did it. And then I called up in Dearborn, Michigan, I think it was General Motors, the Humvee guys. And I got them to put together a Tiger team on helping me reconfigure a Humvee so that I could have, the RPV display. I could have the radar and all this stuff all communicate in a single van. Then they did it, and Staff Sergeant Copus and I sat there and built the damn thing, and we went out and we were testing it. And it was working like a champ. We were adjust fire on everything, mobile, communicating. The enemy fired, the enemy died. That was the important thing. The enemy fired, the enemy died. That's the key to winning a war. Kill the enemy as soon as they shoot. And we were doing it, and all of a sudden the phone started ringing at the commanding generals. First of all, Headquarters Marine Corps. Why do we got a bill from General Motors for, I forget what the number is, $1.2 million or something like that. What the hell project are they doing to 511? Who is Lieutenant Ritter? Why is he authorizing funds? Da-da-da. They were like, we don't know. And then they got McTissa. They sent a bill for the modification. So I'm in the field. My battalion commander gets called in, and he's being chewed out. They're going to court-martial me. They're putting me in jail. It's over. And he goes to my XO, and he goes, we can't do this. This kid's not doing anything wrong. He's just doesn't understand how the world really works. So they sent me to flight school instead. I went to, I got orders to become an aerial observer. So that's how I went to New River, and I learned how to, operate out of the back of a OV-10. And I got all that experience, came back, and now I became the S3 Air, and that's how we brought in all the air. But
so hold on, just to clear it up. Just to clear it up for me, aerial observer, does that qualify you to be a forward air controller in an aerial platform, or is that a separate thing?
Oh, no, I was a forward air controller. I was everything.
Okay, so that's the school to be a FAC A.
Yep, and I did naval gunfire. I did artillery. I did radio recon. We did it all. And we brought in, we controlled the fast movers. And the idea is you're doing them all at the same time. Back then is, the final exam was actually coordinating naval gunfire, artillery, and air all at the same time while looking for a lost platoon. So they're throwing everything at you, and you're doing it all. It was great. And
Scott, I think a lot of our listeners won't be familiar with why all that stuff matters. So one of the things that discriminates the Marine Corps from even the Army and certainly from even the more advanced militaries in the world is what you're talking about, the combined arms. The Marine Corps, in my opinion, people may differ, but they would be wrong. Kind of was the pioneers of this combined arms. The way that it's done now in the modern warfare is pioneered by the Marine Corps. And so, and it sounds like you were kind of now, I know it predates you. I know that Marines, even in Vietnam and stuff, the naval gunfire, those forward observers kind of were doing a lot of pioneering stuff about how to be out, at the lead trace with the ground combat units, but managing all those assets. And when he's talking about flying around in a plane, looking for a lost Marine while coordinating all that stuff, the job is like you're simultaneously air traffic control. It's an exercise in timing because you've got to suppress the enemy's air defense with artillery, but you've got to shut those fires off before the aircraft come in. You're a conductor of a bunch of very lethal systems. So it's a very complicated, high stress job for sure.
Yeah, Aaron, you're a SOTAC, right?
Yeah, well, I was a JTAC,
JTAC.
I didn't go to SOTAC. I went to the Marine Corps one, actually. Most of the soft guys go to the Special Operations one. We ran out of quotas, so I went to the regular Marine Corps one at EWTG PAC. The same one they send the battalion air what do they call them? Airplane or something like that. I forget.
Yeah, all of this stuff sounds pretty wild, and I guess for the guys that were in the military recently, and this probably will eventually get us towards like the bureaucracy mire that we're in now. But like it would be impossible to do any of that stuff today.
Oh no,
because
you're 100% correct.
Yeah.
Like
remember, this
it makes
is
me think of like Heartbreak Ridge style. Well, this is like 85, 86. Like
this is 85 to 80, 87. Okay. I went to the basic school. At the very moment that General Gray, Al Gray, who I think was the greatest commandant in the history,
legend,
he's a great man. And Al Gray was in the process of introducing maneuver warfare to the Marine Corps. He wrote a brand new FM. He did, and so the basic school was just going bonkers because the commander's intent now was we were the first class that they pushed commander intent down. And so we were literally a bunch of stupid Rambos running around, commander intenting the hell out of everything. And they had to pull us in and say, well, every once in a while you actually have to do the mission you've been assigned. You can't get too creative here. But the whole idea was, maneuver warfare, not to rebuild the Iwo Jima Memorial. The whole idea was to stop putting Marines over the beach and getting them slaughtered and figure out a smart way to do it. So we were studying things like John Boyd, the OODA-loop. That was a big thing back then. Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. He was what he called 32nd Boyd in a head-on aerial combat. He could move and get you to react, and he'd shoot you down in 30 seconds. Well, that's what our job was, to get inside the enemy's decision-making cycle. And if you did that, then you owned them and you would defeat them eventually. And the whole Marine Corps was transitioning. You had a whole bunch of legacy people. When I say legacy, I'm talking, some of the old master guns were still World War II guys. The Vietnam guys dominated. And so you had this cadre of just free thinkers that were doing this. And I happened to come in right when that was happening. And I was blessed with commanders who believed it, and they gave me a chance. I did things as a first lieutenant, as a second lieutenant, that you would never be allowed to do today, ever. They let me literally run wild and free. And I did a good job. I mean, I did a really good job coming out. That's why when I finished, they were supposed, like every lieutenant, you want to go to the fleet, So they're like, fill out your fitness report. I know today it's different, but back then you had three things, and it was FMF. I want to go to the fleet.
Yeah, you still got. They're still on there.
Okay,
so three choices. They're still on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
They usually get ignored, probably about with the same.
Always get ignored.
The same rate that they did back then. Like
my monitor wanted to send me to 8th and I, but my battalion commander convinced him that I couldn't march, and it was the God's honest truth. I can't march. So that saved me. So I got orders to I think it was 15th MUSOC, or at that time it was Mao. for the Muses were MOUs, amphibious units, special operations capable. Just as it was happening, General Gray had just invented this concept. So I was going to be the S2 Alpha for this, and I was so excited. But my battalion commander told the Marine Corps, they said, don't send him back to the fleet. So this guy's got to be doing other stuff, national stuff. You need to get him up here, not down here. And then Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev sat down in December of 1987 and signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was a treaty to get rid of intermediate range nuclear missiles. And for the United States, it was Pershing IIs, ground launched cruise missiles. For the Soviets, it was primarily the SS-20, but also the SS-12, SS-4, SS-5, etc. And these things were literally going to cause the end of the world. I mean, we were on the razor's edge back then. A lot of people don't realize how close we were to a nuclear apocalypse in the 1980s. Able Archer, I'm sure you've heard of that exercise in '83. We almost bought the farm, and there were other instances where mistakes were made and they almost launched because they mistook a radar hit for missiles launching and things like that. And the key thing about the INF was the Pershing II, once launched, could hit Moscow in less than 12 minutes, which meant that your decision cycle was reduced and you'd have no time. So if there was a mistaken Pershing launch, they'd launch immediately, we'd all die. I wasn't aware of that at the time because I'm just a stupid Marine out in the fleet doing my thing. I'm not a strategic guy. I wasn't at that time. My resume in college said Russian history major. They said 2 years of Russian language. I was drinking beer and playing football, which means my Russian language skills were not good. And the job was supposed to be for a major. I was a first lieutenant, newly promoted. And they basically, though, the Marine Corps spat through, their qualified people, and they didn't have anybody. And so next thing I know, my orders are canceled. Literally, I'm packing up to go to San Diego, and they go, "No, you're not. You're going to Washington, D.C." And as I traveled, I had to call in because my orders were being modified the whole time. And I showed up. I was the first person to check into what's called the On-Site Inspection Agency. That was a new Department of Defense activity created to do this job. And this job was on-site inspection. It had never been done before. It's a key aspect to arms control. Trust but verify. That was Ronald Reagan's mantra. So everybody had obligations. Now, for the first time, we were going to put teams on the soil of the other side to visually monitor, to inspect. That had never been done.
Was that reciprocated? Was there a Russian counterpart that came into our place?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, this treaty was 100% reciprocal. And that reciprocity was a big deal. And I'll get it. Basically, do unto them as they're going to do to you. And so if you want to play tough guy and screw around with their inspectors, then your inspectors are going to get screwed around. If you want to cooperate, then there's cooperation. It was pure 100% reciprocity.
So I can add a little bit of that, Aaron. So my first gig at security forces, I stood up 3 start inspections. So the cycle at the place was we were on a 3-week cycle. One 7-day period, you'd be in the wire protecting the nuclear weapons. 1 7-day period, you were the wharf platoon. So if Trident came in and they had to get shit taken off of it, you'd have to go babysit the boomer in the pen, and then you were a training and start, because these starts could happen at any time, right? So like we would be at Fort Lewis shooting maybe, but we would also be the start platoon. So for the start platoon, basically what happened was like this shit happened one day at like 3 a.m. or some shit. We actually had pagers, geeky enough, and no kidding, we get the update that there's a start inspection coming. So Russians are coming to Naval Submarine Base Bangor. There's a special RV for them, like a recreational vehicle that they're going to drive them around in, right? And so the first thing we had to do was we got all jocked up in our battle rattle, like black body armor. We were the CQB unit, so M4s, and we go like goose step, like we get led like goose stepping into like the base commander's building where he's receiving these dudes. And I don't know if they're just like, hey, look, we have armored assault Marines here or some shit. But then we would go down.
You're like a prop.
Yeah, but then we would go down and we would like clear the areas that they were going to be inspecting and shit. And we had to clear their little RV, and you open up the thing. Like Scott said, it's full of Twinkies. Like it's full of everything they can't. But this is like 90, 99.
Yeah.
But it's still going on, right? So they had to be able to get this stuff in Russia. Anyway, there was a lot of lickies and chewies and shit and like, snacks inside the RV. And, it was a dude in a black leather jacket that I remember seeing. And, yeah, man. So start treaty any old time. They could just show up. It happened 3 times in the 3 years I was there.
That's wild.
Yeah. But the thing about everything you did, when we did it, it had never been done before, ever. We were literally writing the book on on-site inspection. And what I ended up doing, when I showed up again, as I arrived there, they literally canceled my job. My job was supposed to be intelligence analyst. And General LaJoy, the Army General Commander, the most experienced foreign area officer in the U.S. military at the time, a legend. In fact, he's been inducted into the Intelligence Hall of Fame. He's a god. LaJoy was creating this unit, and he specifically said, we're going to man it with our most experienced foreign area officers. These are guys with advanced degrees in Russian area studies. They speak the language fluently, and most of them have been doing the tours. I'm talking about real tours, like in Moscow as a defense attaché, which means a spy, doing real world intelligence collection, or with the military liaison mission in Potsdam, Germany, spying on the Soviet group of forces in Berlin, a job that, by the way, Major Arthur Nicholson got shot and killed in 1985 doing that job. This isn't, it's not, the drivers, just so you guys would understand, the drivers were recruited from a unit that we could talk about today, but it was Dead A, Detachment A, Berlin Brigade. Before there was Delta Force, there was Dead A. Dead A were the gods of unconventional warfare, counterterrorism, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's the one that Mac. I forgot the guy's the old Delta guy, McNamara. I think he was talking about running in East Germany. I think that's the unit he was talking about.
Yeah, he was with it. But so that's the caliber of people we have. So I walk in there and I'm unemployed because I don't have a job. I'm the junior guy there. The next senior person's a major, and there's a whole bunch of majors, a whole bunch of lieutenant colonels, a whole bunch of colonels, and then a general, brigadier general, and me, a first lieutenant. And so these two guys come up to me, and it turns out that they were legends in their own right. One guy, Tom Brock, used to run teams in Vietnam, part of the special operations group guys that took indigenous teams over into Laos and all that stuff. So he had that background, but then he became a FAO, and he had worked the Soviet target. And the other guy was, gosh, I can't remember his name now, but a really good guy who was involved in the whole Afghan thing, defeating the Soviets in Afghanistan. They said, well, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. They said, well, want to work for us? Want to be an inspector? I said, yeah. They said, okay, why don't, let's work. And so I was walking down the hall, and another lieutenant colonel stops me, a Marine, and his name was Kelly, Lieutenant Colonel Kelly, Pulemyot Kelly. That's Russian for machine gun, because he spoke Russian fluently and he spoke it fast like a machine gun. And next thing you know, I'm locked up. This guy is just spewing Russian at me, and I don't understand it. And he said, you don't speak Russian worth a damn. I said, never did, sir. Never claimed to. He said, you disgrace the uniform you're wearing. You disgrace the Marine Corps. You're an embarrassment. You will never step foot in the Soviet Union. I'm kicking you out of here. You might as well go pack your bag. So I went back to the other two guys and I said, well, I was fired. They said, well, that happens. Don't worry about it. Long story short, the colonel said that I would never be in the Soviet Union. I was the first inspector on the ground in the Soviet Union in June of 1988. I led the advanced team into a place called Vodkinsk, which is a Soviet ICBM missile factory that had produced SS-20 missiles, and now had to be monitored full time by an inspection team. And I was the guy on the ground, the first, on July 1st, when the clock ticked over, number one inspector on the ground, me. That's my claim to fame. I was the first INF inspector ever, because I was already in the Soviet Union when it happened. All the other guys were flying in. But I did that job. We built this facility out in the middle of nowhere. We had to work with the Soviet counterparts, overcoming every possible obstacle. I'm talking about minus 50, minus 60, minus 70 degree in the winter, where we had to build things outdoors. The mud was unreal. The politics was unreal, and we did it. We had some crises. There was some interesting stuff, but the job was done. And it was one of the most rewarding. I can say this, but I can't really get. I got for a guy that wasn't supposed to be doing intelligence, I got 2 classified commendations from the director of the CIA for my work in Vodkinsk. So again, as a first lieutenant, junior captain, I was frocked as a captain because my colonel said, "You can't have a lieutenant here. You're doing a lieutenant colonel's job, so we're going to have to at least promote you something. So we're going to call you a captain." So I got frocked into captain. I didn't get paid, but at least I got to wear the rank. But you didn't wear a uniform over there. But at least the Soviets called me captain now. But it was a great job. one of the best things I've ever done in my life. It was the most rewarding thing, and the best part about it was the transition from being a guy who trained to kill Soviets. Remember, I told you at 29 Palms, all I did is train to fight Soviets. I hated these people. I wanted to slaughter them. And now I'm working with them, and suddenly the whole humanity thing kicks in, and you're going like, why the hell do we want to kill each other? This is stupidity extreme. But the other inspections I did, though, because I was one of the few people, these missiles would come out, and we would, before we were building this $12 million X-ray machine that was supposed to X-ray the missiles in their canister. While I was being built, we had to inspect. So on occasion, we would designate one, and we'd pop the lid off, and we'd get to look inside to see the missile. And so I was one of the only people in the United States that ever got to look inside a canister and see the missile. Later on, we had to do these inspections, short notice inspections for INF of SS-25 sites. They used to be SS-20 missile sites, a road mobile missile. They'd been converted to SS-25. So our job was to go in and make sure they weren't hiding SS-20s as SS-25. We called them radiation detection inspections. You go in with this gear, you put over the missile, you measure the gamma rays and all this stuff, do a calculation, determine what the neutron flux is, and that doesn't matter. The point is, I did you talked about the Soviets showing up at your base. I was the guy that showed up at the Soviet missile base. We showed up at a Soviet SS-25 road mobile intercontinental ballistic missile base, and we had to do that inspection there. So, that was one of the cooler things that I've ever done. And so I finished that job. The Marine Corps wanted me to do some weird stuff afterwards because I had a reputation with the intelligence community. But the first thing I had to do is go to amphibious warfare school because the Marine Corps needs you to check off that box.
Yeah, you got to do the what do they call it? Like a repayment tour. They're like, hey, you've been having too much fun and being too effective, so you got to come back and do like some Marine Corps
they were going to send me
tour,
straight. They were going to send me straight to the weird tour, but I had to get my my schooling out of the way.
Yeah,
I had to get my
your professional military education.
PME. Yep.
PME.
But while I was there, Saddam invaded Kuwait, and I got stripped out of the school and sent to the warfighting center under Major General Caulfield, who was operating under direct orders of Commandant Al Gray to come up with innovative amphibious assault options for the Marine Corps, because all Schwarzkopf wanted to do is put 2 Marine divisions on the line and go, hey, diddle, diddle, straight up the middle. And Gray's like, that's not what we're about. We need to come up. So as a junior captain, I was briefing Corps level amphibious assault options to the Commandant of the Marine Corps that I designed from scratch. It was the craziest thing. I mean, I literally, and I'm talking about the whole tip fiddle thing, diverting resource logistics build up, the whole thing. I'm not talking about, 3 pages. I'm talking about a detailed plan. And I'm up briefing the comments. That's how I got to know Al Gray pretty good. But I remember the commander of the Colonel Marks, I think his name was. I might be wrong with the name, so I shouldn't use the name. Sorry about that, Colonel Marks. If I'm
if he finds his way to this podcast,
whoever the commander of the director of the Marine Corps intelligence activity was at the time, I remember I was going in to brief, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Look, there's a lot of people who are studying this problem who are more experienced than you, and they have more firepower on their shoulder. If the commandant asks you a question, you give him the school answer. You do not deviate." I said, all right. So I went in there and flipping the slides, and finally the commandant looks at me and he goes, look, I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing you flipping the slides, and I know that you're the one who designed it and wrote the brief. Isn't that right, Colonel? And the Colonel goes, yeah. And he goes, okay, so I'm going to ask you the question. What's going to happen? And the other colonel's staring at me, ready for me to say, this is going to be a tough fight. We need to prepare. And I said, this is going to be Chuhoy. I said, we cut off the head. We cut off the command and control. We hit him with firepower, a little bit of maneuver, and we're going to spend, I said, I guarantee we're going to spend more time processing Iraqi prisoners of war than we will be killing Iraqis. And he goes, yeah, that's what I think too. Man, I got locked up in the hallway by this colonel who was reading me the riot act. But when the war ended, General Gray went to the Marine Corps intelligence activity, and he called me out by name. He said, in the whole lead up to the war, I was just given this garbage, this horse bone. Boom. He said there was only one guy that had the courage to stand up and tell me, what they thought it was. And he said that's what the Marine Corps needs to be. It needs to be that officer, and that was me. So I was very proud of that fact to be called out that way by the Commandant of the Marine Corps. One of the big deals. But I left the Marine Corps at that point in time because I'd fought my war. Oh, yeah, I missed the whole war. I ended up getting sent by name to go work for General Boomer, who's a common Marine guy. But when I got there, they lost my orders, so I ended up working for General Schwarzkopf. And
to be clear, if you'd have blinked, you'd have missed that war. You know, like the first one was like a week. You know.
Well, yeah, but the part that the war that I was involved in was the counter Scud war, because I was the missile guy, and so I that war lasted the whole duration, and trying to hunt down Iraqi Scuds, and I got to play with a lot of really cool people, the Air Force types, the Army's Delta, British SAS, SEALs. I was the Scud guy that went around and helped them figure out how to kill Scuds. And I had what they call a good war, meaning that I didn't get killed and I did a good job. And so when I came out of that, I was like, okay, I did the war. I've done a whole bunch of really cool stuff, but the Cold War is over. I don't have the urge to kill people anymore. I like this idea of peaceful coexistence and and all that kind of stuff. So I left the Marine Corps, and I got a job with H.J. Heinz, which is they make the food processing company, and they were going to build food processing plants in the Soviet Union. And because I had experience installing a multi-million-dollar facility in the middle of nowhere, they said, "Why don't you come and take that experience and help us install these facilities in the Soviet Union?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." And it was doing a good pay, good job. And then they had a coup in Russia. The KGB decided that Gorbachev was going to go down, and Yeltsin got on a tank, and H.J. Heinz got cold feet and pulled their contract out. And I was unemployed. I was actually filling out an application to the New Mexico State Troopers. Yes, I would have been writing names if you're going through New Mexico. When the phone rang, and it was a colonel that I worked for in Russia, an American colonel. He's now responsible for standing up this United Nations inspection team that's going to go into Iraq. And this was in August. The Iraqis, the inspections began in April. The Iraqis had been given an opportunity to give an accurate declaration. And when the inspectors went in, they found out that the Iraqis had lied through their teeth about that they were holding on to a whole bunch of weapons of mass destruction. They were denying a nuclear program, denying a biological weapons program, held on to over 100 missiles, thousands of rounds of chemical ammunition. And so now we went from being an INF START type inspection where you come in with a declaration, you do everything by the book, and we had to revamp ourselves into a forensic based inspection that was very confrontational. So my job is to come in and create an intelligence unit. So I was the United Nations first intelligence officer. Because when you open up the UN phone book, there is no intelligence organization. The UN doesn't believe in intelligence.
And that's dicey too, because when it comes to intelligence and actual intelligence collectors, these are some, as per agreements we have with the other countries of the world. Like I'm not one, but if I were an intelligence officer and I was entering another country under that capacity, I would have to declare as such. And then intelligence officers that enter countries to do intelligence collection that don't declare, they consider those people to be conducting espionage. You know what I mean? So that's kind of fraught, dicey territory there a little bit.
Well, it's very dicey, except we had a Security Council Resolution 687 passed under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter that basically told the Iraqis, you cooperate with these guys or you die. Literally. I mean, people don't understand what these weapons inspections, I think people have lost the thing. When I carried out a confrontational forensic-based inspection, we had guys on the team that were from special operations community or CIA's special activities people who had beacons on them. Their job was basically not only to help us with the inspection, but if we got taken hostage, they were the ones who were going to organize us into select teams so that when the hostage rescue came in and killed everybody, we wouldn't get killed and we could be taken out. Every inspection had a hostage rescue component built into it because that's how confrontational these inspections were. But, so my job, I didn't carry weapons. You didn't go in there armed. I went in there with nothing but the blue UN passport, a nice blue hat, and I guess the biggest pair of balls that a man could possibly have, because my job was to go in and stare the Iraqis in the face, say, we're going in there. And they'd point an AK-47 in my face and say, no, you're not. I'd say, yes, we are. then we'd have the standoff. And that's what we did. I did for 7 years. I led, I participated in over 40 inspections. And the way it worked is I would go around the world and liaise with various intelligence services and get the information they had about Iraqi weapons of mass destruction capabilities. Then I would come back and build a plan, an inspection plan. Then I would lead the inspection into Iraq, and then I would come back and do the cycle all over again, because this is iterative. We weren't going to solve this problem in one inspection. It was a campaign of inspections designed to break the Iraqis down. And I would build an intelligence collection plan. We had a U-2 aircraft assigned to us, so I would coordinate U-2 overflights and the various sensors on that. Remember, when I talk about the United Nations, because we're not U.S. government, there's no security clearances. It all has to be treated sensitive, but it's not like we have to, that was a big problem, because the U.S. is like, well, the U-2's collection capability is classified. And I said, well, it can't be classified if you give it to the United Nations. So we had to build certain mechanisms inside.
Well, you've basically got to take what the U-2 collects, and you've got to give it to your UN partners in a way that doesn't reveal the complete capability of the U-2 in some way, right? I mean, is that the game?
No, that's what the U.S. tried to say. What I said is no. I said that U-2 has UN painted on it. Every capability on that aircraft belongs to me.
That's been flying around since the 50s. It's ridiculous for them to pretend like nobody knows about it.
It doesn't belong to the United States. It belongs to me. When it flies over Iraq, it's doing what I'm telling it to do, and the information it collects belongs to me. This was a big fight. I mean, this went up to the DCI level, a big fight with John Deutsch over this that we won, by the way. The same thing when we one of the things that we had to work on is when we came in, the Iraqis would stop us, and our concern was they were moving things. So we'd have an overhead collection plan with the U-2, with other overhead, with helicopters. We had an aerial inspection team with German helicopters, the guys with cameras snapping pictures and stuff. The Iraqis would threaten to shoot them down. They'd have to land. All cool. But what we really wanted to do is find out what they're saying. And so, I created the United Nations first covert SIGINT unit, and we deployed into Iraq. And these are guys that if we'd been caught doing this, we would have been shot 100%. And we modified equipment and all this stuff. And we listened in on it was all encrypted for the most part. So then I had to work with the Israelis on breaking the code and getting the transcripts and all. But I'm just saying that this is real world intelligence. People go, oh, United Nations. I mean, you were in Somalia. UN's sort of a joke. No, we were the real deal. We were the best in the world at doing what we did. We did every aspect of human or of intelligence collection, from human to SIGINT to imagery to everything. And we were good. By the time I wrapped up my deployment there 7 years in, we had accounted for 95+% of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. And I'm talking about some really cool things that we did to uncover. I'll give you an example. I was in Israel working with the Israelis on assessing the U-2 imagery, because the United States was playing games. They wouldn't let me into INPIC because I didn't have a security clearance. I said, how stupid can you be? It's my film. Who are you protecting it from? They said, well, we're not going to work with you. I said, okay. I called up the Israelis. I said, will you look at this film and work? They said, yeah, we'll work with you. And I got the CIA's permission to deploy U-2 film into Israel. So we're doing that job. And then the Israelis, they didn't know quite what to make with me. They thought I was a guy who talked big, but I could talk the talk, but could I walk the walk? So they came up to me and they said, we have some very sensitive information, intelligence. I said, what is it? They said, we have information that says that the Iraqis are smuggling sophisticated guidance and control equipment out of Moscow through Jordan into Iraq. I said, okay, how? And they said, well, it's in Jordan right now. The plane's landing. We need you to go to Jordan and convince the king of Jordan to do a raid on this warehouse, intercept this stuff before it gets to Iraq. And I had less than 24 hours to get this thing done. So I used Israeli secure channels to get to my boss, explain the situation. Next thing I know, I'm going across the border in one of these weird spy versus spy things, crossing the Alameen Bridge. There's a black limo with one of the king's bodyguards there, puts me in. We get driven up, and I brief the head of their intelligence. And I tell him, you got to go right now. Right now, it's no trouble. He's like, well, how do I know this true? I said, because I'm standing here in front of you. I'm telling you it's the truth. He ordered the raid. They found all the gyros. We intercepted it. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're doing. This is real world. It's very good. We were very good at what we did, and that's so I did that for 7 years, and then I resigned in 1998 because I wasn't allowed to do my job anymore because the United States wasn't interested in disarming Iraq. The United States was interested in using us to collect intelligence so they could assassinate Saddam Hussein.
So that kind of brings us to the meat and potatoes. So at what point during that 7 years, so the weapons were accounted for, and at a certain point, I guess that means that Saddam, whether forcibly or wittingly or unwittingly, he complied to get rid of the weapons of mass destruction. So I guess that spins us up to the portion of they're building up. So 9/11 happens, right? And we're already kind of long in the tooth, so there's no reason to dive down that rabbit hole. But so the Afghan war kicks off, and that seems to be won within a matter of hours by SOF and the CIA with parachutes and like bags of money and shit. And so then we start prepping for the war for Iraq, right? That brings us into Colin Powell. That brings us into all of that. So I guess
hey Cody, let me plop this video up and then maybe he can
okay, cool, yeah,
bring us up to how he ended up in front of Biden. I want to play that clip of you with Biden just because I think even especially in the context of like now that we observe Biden and we see what he's up to all the time, this clip literally makes me like my blood boil. Just something about his demeanor and how arrogant he is. I think it's emblematic of like the whole foreign policy apparatus in this one little clip. So
yeah,
I'm going to play it.
While Aaron's firing that up, I'm going to go ahead and congratulate you on your ability to maintain bearing ahead of time, man. Because I'd have lost my shit and probably caught a jail sentence.
It's fairly amazing. The way he's talking is fairly amazing. So I'm going to play. I'm sure you know what I'm about to play. And then you can walk us into how you ended up in that chair talking to Biden.
Suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. Wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were president of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in. So what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power is not enough. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Above your pay grade.
So you told us the truth. Thanks. But
something tells me he wasn't actually that grateful for you having told the truth.
No. I mean, we'll back up just for a second. In 1996, the CIA Special Activities Group hijacked one of my inspection teams without my knowing it, and used it as a vehicle to assassinate Saddam Hussein and orchestrate a coup. And it put everything at risk. I'm talking that SIGINT team that I talked about. They could have been taken out, lined up against a wall, and killed. I could have been shot. Everybody could have been shot because of the stupidity of the CIA. And I'm just straight up saying it right now. I think the CIA is a criminal organization. They have some good analysts. They have some good operators.
The Crisis Initiation Agency. Yeah, we agree.
They straight up lied to me, and they lied to everybody. But so I was fighting as an inspector. I was fighting the Iraqis on one front, but I was fighting the U.S. government on the other side. In 1998, I was tapped to lead an inspection team that the United States thought was going to generate a war. In fact, they planned on it generating a war. I went to the White House and briefed the inspection mission. They added an inspection site, the Ministry of Defense. This is like saying we're going to go into the Pentagon. Have our Iraqi team go into the Pentagon, and that, oh, by the way, they want to go into the secret room where, the war room with all the maps. And we're going to be like, no, you'll die before. They got, people like you, Cody, are going to be saying, no, my job is to kill people who try to come in here. And so, they're saying, no, you're going to do that. I said, but that's a red line. They will go to war if we, plus there's no reasonable arms control purpose for us to do this. They said,
yeah, they're not hiding them there probably.
Yeah, my boss was like, no, you're gonna do it. So we actually were in the U.S. mission at the United Nations after I briefed this at the White House. He briefed at the State Department, where they told me that I had to generate a crisis on this date so that the cruise missiles could be flying by this date. And I'm like, guys, that's not my job. My job is to be an inspector. Like, no, you just do your job, but we know how this is going to play out. I said, okay. So I went to Iraq with my team. And remember, I told you, every team went in as a hostage rescue potential. This one, we thought we were going to die. We thought we were going to go into the Ministry of Defense, and we thought they were going to surround us or shoot us on the spot. So I pull up, and they stop us. The guns are out. And they come up, and they say, you can't go in here. You know what this is? And I said, yeah, but do you guys know what this is? He said, what? I said, you do know that if I leave, it's all over. They said, yeah, no, we expect it. I said, no, you don't understand. It's all over. Okay, so is that what we want? Do we want that? They said, but you can't go in here. And I said, I have to go in here, and you have to let me go in here. And and the bottom line is, I sat down with them. I had a very intense discussion with their equivalent of General Mark Miley, their equivalent of Lloyd Austin, all their guys. We're having one of these great Arab meals where we're all reaching in and eating. I said, look, you got to let me in or it's over. And they said, but how can we trust you? And I said, well, you're just going to have to trust me. I said, I can't tell you what I'm looking for. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. What I can tell you is that everything I do will comply with the Security Council mandate given to me. I'm not here to spy on you. I'm here to do my job. And then one of the guys turned to me and he said, is it true? Or no, he said, when was the last time you were in Israel? Now, when they ask that question, that means they know the answer. So I gave them the answer. I said, no, I was there on this date and all that. And they go, he's telling the truth. Okay. They let me do the inspection. While I did it took me 16 hours to do this inspection, by the way. It was the craziest inspection in the world. While we were doing that, Madeleine Albright's in France telling the French how she's got the fix in, there's going to be a war, the cruise missiles are going to fly, she's waiting the call. The call she got, though, was that I was in. So the Clinton administration believed that I had betrayed them, that, me doing my job, I betrayed the United States by not setting up the war. The long story short, it comes back to the summer of '98. And we get a very good intelligence tip from the MI6 about guidance, ballistic missile guidance components hidden in a specific site in Baghdad. And so I want to take a team in and surround the site and get in there and get the stuff. And this was perishable intelligence, very good human intelligence, the whole thing. And I briefed it again. I went to the White House. We briefed it. Madeleine Albright, Richard Cohen, Sandy Berger. They were all there talking, saying, yes, 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 this is what we want you to do. My team goes in there and they get cold feet and they pull the plug, and they order my team out. And then they were going to shut down everything. So I resigned. I said, I'm not going to play this game anymore. And I resigned, and I wrote a letter of resignation, and the Senate said, we want you to come and testify, but we want you to come with Madeleine Albright and Richard Cohen. I'm like, yes, because again, Joe Biden's right. It's above my pay grade, but it ain't about pay grade. It's about access. See, what Joe Biden didn't understand is that when he says, they have decisions to make. With all due respect, Joe Biden, I made the decision. They were the ones that listened to me. They were the ones that nodded their head yes when I said we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Madeleine Albright had approved everything. Cohen had approved everything. I knew they approved it because I was there when they approved it. I briefed them. I'm the guy who designed the mission. I knew everything about this mission. And so I'm more than happy to talk about the Senate about how they sabotaged a weapons inspection effort that was hopefully going to repeat what I did. Remember when I told you about the interception of the gyros in Jordan? And so Albright and Cohen pulled out. They weren't going to be part of this. This was the first time in history that the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate were meeting in joint session. This is a big deal. It's a made-for-TV moment. But it was so big that Joe Biden tried to shut it down because he didn't want he was the administration's attack dog. So he tried to shut it down. They refused to accept a unanimous consent decree to have this thing. The Democrats refused to do that, so it wasn't going to happen. Trent Lott, who was the Senate Majority Leader, suspended the Senate, shut it down. First time in history, just shut it down and said, okay, now we're going to do it. So there's a lot of politics being played as I walk into this room that I was not aware of at the time, to tell you the truth. And I was just told up front, they said, Biden is going to come after you. Don't lose your temper. And so I was pre-warned to just sit there and listen.
I mean,
to him.
you can tell, that you're not having it, but yeah, you did keep your cool. But I mean, how did you, I mean, watching it like angers me, but I already have, this opinion of Biden. Like I already feel like he's one of the most incredibly corrupt. Well, he's from the Biden. He's the head of the Biden crime family. I get, but like in the moment, were you disposed to like now you have a perspective about the U.S. government and these wars, and I think we kind of share a perspective about, hey, look, these guys, they wage these wars for purposes that are not as advertised to the American public, and it has a lot to do with the economy or whatever they're doing. Did you have that perspective back then, or did you still think that these guys were pretty much playing straight up ball, but there was a little bit of politics? Like, how bad back then did you think it was?
Look, I'll be straight up. You guys, Marines, and Marine officers, and junior Marine officers. We may be smart, some of us, and all that, but we are straight laced, and we are true believers. I was a true believer. I mean, I had learned a lot about the CIA. I had learned a lot about people that I never trusted, because I had a big experience with the CIA. So it's not like it shocked me. But I did believe that the United States government at the end of the day was going to do the right thing. I believed in the United States Senate. I believed that these senators, these powerful people up there, would listen and they would do something, would do the right thing. So I didn't come in there prejudiced. I had respect for everybody. And then Biden pulled that number. But what's interesting is at the end of that hearing, he was compelled to apologize. He had to write a letter of apology to the Washington Post and publish it. And then he invited me to his office for a 45-minute one-on-one where he basically apologized too and wrote me a nice letter afterwards saying, hey, it was a good conversation. Let's have it again if you need it. This is where Biden disappointed me, because years later, as we're headed towards a war, Biden is, of course, the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And I tried to, I said, hey, remember that letter you wrote said, if I ever want to talk, give you a call? Well, I'm calling you right now. I think we need to talk about this. Biden wouldn't meet with me. He sent his chief of staff. And I remember showing up in the office, and the chief of staff sat there, and he started straight up saying, you're a traitor to America. You've betrayed America. You've committed treason. And I basically stopped him right there. And I said, I don't think you know who you're talking to. But, I was a commissioned Marine Corps officer. And if you call me that again, I will literally kill you right now. So you have a choice, apologize or die. And I'm being honest with you for what I said. I was so mad at this guy. He apologized. But he basically, and then he later on, he admitted that it wasn't that I was doing anything that was treasonous. I was just embarrassing Joe Biden. That was my biggest crime, was embarrassing Joe Biden by exposing the lies. And by this time, I had lost faith in Joe Biden and the system. And by the time 2002 rolls around, I had lost faith in the entire U.S. government. That's why, I don't know if you guys know this, but when George W. Bush and Tony Blair were conspiring in Crawford, Texas, to shape the intelligence, to fit the intelligence to a preordained outcome. And they said the reason why they're going to do that is because there were no weapons inspectors in Iraq. Inspectors were kicked out in December of 1998 when the United States ordered them out. People keep saying Saddam kicked them out. He didn't. We ordered them out. Then we tried to kill Saddam using intelligence that my team collected. So the Iraqis knew it. The Iraqis called me Abu Azamat, the father of all crises. And they viewed me as the most dangerous man because my team is the one that empowered the CIA to try and kill Saddam Hussein on a number of occasions. So in September, I said, how do we prevent a war? I've tried my best. I've done everything. I've knocked on every door, I've testified before every committee, and they're going to go to war based on a lie. They're talking about weapons of mass destruction that don't exist. And the key was getting inspectors back in. So Tariq Aziz who was the deputy prime minister of Iraq, was in South Africa getting a heart procedure, getting a stent put in September of 2002. I flew to South Africa and I met with Tariq Aziz.
On your own behest, on your own, just as a civilian person.
That's right. And people going,
wow.
Loganak. I'm like, nah, Loganak won't apply. I went to Tariq Aziz and I said, you got to get me into the Iraqi parliament. I have to do a presentation in front of the Iraqi parliament. He said, that's insane. No foreigner has ever spoken before the Iraqi parliament before. He said, why do you want to do it? I said, because I have to convince them to let weapons inspectors back in. He said, we'll never let weapons inspectors back. I said, well, if you don't, then you're all going to die. There's going to be a war. And I'm just telling you right now, we're going to steamroll you. We're going to swamp you. It's going to be over. And he's like, what are you going to say? I said, I can't tell you. You're going to have to trust me to say the right thing at the right time. I said, the other thing is it has to be televised live to the world. It's a broadcast to the world, unscripted. You don't know what I'm going to say. You got to trust me. And he sent the word back, and he said, this is a hard sell. And then it came back, and Saddam said, okay. I flew to Jordan. I took a car into Baghdad, and I spoke before the Iraqi parliament. And I gave one of the best speeches of my life. And it was broadcast live. I was called a traitor back here at home. People call me Saddam's, little soy boy or whatever they want to say. I betrayed my country. But I got back to the United States, and again, everybody's just hammering me, and I'm getting ready to go on CNN's Crossfire, and the producer's saying they're gonna roast you tonight. They're gonna call you a traitor. They're gonna slaughter you. There's unanimity that you're a bad guy. And all of a sudden he comes in. He goes, turn on the TV. Saddam Hussein said he's going to let weapons inspectors back in. We changed the whole calculus. It's because of what I did. And so now I'm going on CNN saying I was right. And it's one of the proudest moments of my life, because I really felt at that point in time that I created the opportunity to avoid a war. Because you see, I'm not a pacifist like you. There are times and places when you have to deliver violence. But as a Marine officer, I have a responsibility, or I had a responsibility, to the Marines under my command, the Marines that I could influence, and a duty to their families, never to put their lives at risk unnecessarily. That there has to be a reason why we're doing something. There has to be a cause worthy of the sacrifice we're ready to make. And going to war in Iraq over weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist is not a cause worthy of that. And yet that's what we were prepared to do. So that's why I had to go to Iraq. That's why I had to meet with Parliament. That's why I had to get the Iraqi government changed. And when they said that, I literally was so relieved, because I had the weight of the world. I mean, I had the FBI come down on me. I had the CIA come down. I was called Sandy Berger called me the known enemy of the state. The Bush administration was calling me, the number one threat to the United States of America. I went and briefed NATO in the spring of 2002 after Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Armitage went in and lied to them. I went to NATO and briefed them, and Nicholas Burns, who's currently the ambassador to China, was the ambassador to NATO. And he lambasted everybody. He said, why did you invite a known enemy of the state to speak to you? That's how they treated me.
Wolfowitz of the Wolfowitz doctrine and the whole plan to. I had no idea about that, about you speaking in front of the Parliament that way, and I appreciate that a lot, because like Cody and I end up on the business end of this whole thing, right? So I'll relay this to you. I was so convinced, like I saw the 9/11, which had the effect of being like a ritual, right? So it's almost like a spell gets cast, right? And it gets guys like me and Cody, who from the time I saw that until the time I ended up in Iraq behind a sniper rifle, my singular focus in life was to find myself back into the infantry, back into a sniper platoon, and in Iraq or wherever they would send me to find who was responsible and start killing them, right? I remember specifically being in Kuwait. We're staged there prior to the invasion, and no one's sure yet whether we're actually going to do this thing or not, because there's some back and forth. There's some, are we going to go? Are we not going to go? Are they going to let the inspection team? What are they going to find? And I remember there's an AP reporter that had a transistor radio. And I remember us sitting on the back of a Humvee, or he had the radio on the back of a Humvee, and us all sitting there. And it's Hans Blix of, what is he? The UN. I don't even remember what body, And I remember that's when we find he basically, I can't remember how all the mechanics of it were, but it was like the decision was made by the UN, and we are going in, we are going to invade. And my feeling was relief, like joy, like I was horrified that we weren't going to get to go invade Iraq. That's how much I believed in what we were doing, which is insane. Which is insane.
You have to. You have to believe that. I mean, my dog is going crazy right now, but no, you have to believe that. And I never once, blamed the trigger pullers for this war. You were doing your job. I blamed the decision makers behind it. I have to tell you, I had the exact opposite thing. I had just finished speaking in Southern California, trying to stop this war, and I was flying home, and I was transiting through Detroit. And when the TV showed that the war had begun, and I was sick to my stomach because I knew right then that Marines were going to die, and that this was that these were deaths that could have been avoided. There's, again, I when I say I have no problem, I mean, you guys know the business, and it's a tough business, and there's a price to pay, and it ain't free doing what you do. But I believe that we have a mission to do, and we sacrifice that which needs to be sacrificed to accomplish the mission. This was not a mission that needed to be fought, and I was sick to my stomach when that happened because I had literally tried everything to stop this war. I had put the weight of that burden on my shoulders because this is a war about weapons of mass destruction. I was the guy in the world that knew that there were no weapons of mass destruction. I was doing everything in my power to educate people, inform people, and stop this war, and it didn't work. And so there was a long time during the war that every death I took personally. Every death I blamed on me. I said it's my fault. If I had done a better job, if I had just told people better, if I found a better way to tell this story, a better way to get this information across, we could have stopped this war, and that Marine wouldn't have died, that soldier wouldn't have died, that airman wouldn't have died. And it took me a while. I mean, to this day, I still have some residual guilt, but it took me a while for people to smack me into common sense and say, you can't do that. It's not your fault.
Yeah, I think it's unreal. I think any reasonable person would consider what you did to have been a Herculean effort. The insult to injury on the weapons of mass destruction thing is just kind of like, this is how my brain works. It's like kind of humor, but there were no weapons of mass destruction. The actual threat of them employing chemical weapons against us was not what they told us. We were so freaked out, or not freaked out, but so prepared for the chemical weapons fight that we fought the first month of the war in our mop suit,
April.
Which, as you know,
we got to take ours off in April.
That in and of itself is enough to piss me off the rest of my life. You know what I mean?
I don't know how you did it.
You could have just done it in our camis and been fine, Like
sometimes I feel like my whole life has been like a Forrest Gump movie, right? Like the universe was showing me that it was a fraud like the entire time. Like in Kuwait, Oliver North showed up. Somebody's like, "Hey, Oliver North's in a tent next door." And I'm a sergeant. I'm a Kilo Company Assault Section Leader. Like Aaron said, I'm a true believer too, right? Like, hey, whatever. I was like, oh, Oliver North. Yeah, cool. That guy, like, didn't he take the fall for a president or some shit? That sounds like some cool thing to do. So like somewhere around here, I've got my picture a picture with me shaking Oliver North's hand. And this psychopath like tussles my hair, right? Like I still had hair, but like he knows what the hell we're about to go do because
he's like, hey boys. Yeah, he was a platoon. Well, he was a platoon commander in Vietnam.
Well, he was also running drugs for the CIA. I mean,
yes.
So he knows what the fuck we're about to do, right? Like, I was gonna tell you, Scott. Like, I have a lot of admiration for you and Colonel McGregor's ability to like insult people, politely. Like I don't have it, right? So I'm just call it like being the crusty chief warrant officer, man. But like like scumbags, like Oliver North, So fast forward. We go over the berm, we're on the 8 highway, whatever the freeway that we took all the way up. And we like herringbone for a little bit to hang out. And like, well, here comes all these special operations guys and like land cruisers and like the crazy Humvees that I became accustomed to. And they get out and like, well, that dude's wearing jeans and a polo and like a chest rig out of who knows who that guy was. But like all the other dudes, they're wearing camis. And I'm looking around, and we just had to cut a guy out of a mop suit because he was like allergic to the activated charcoal or some shit. Like we medevaced him, and I'm like, well, what the fuck do these guys know that like that we don't know? Like what intel?
And they were the guys looking for the weapons of mass destruction,
right? Wearing nothing, and I'm like, wait a minute. So then I saw so then I started actually seeing the remnants of the Iraqi army because they just disappeared. I wasn't, 3-7. We didn't hit any of the major. We got in some combat in Baghdad, but we didn't hit any of the major problems the other guys did. It was OIF fun for me, man. And I think I just TBI'd where I was going with that.
Mop suits.
Yeah, I think. It was the military. It's the age. It's the story as old as time. I actually see these people who were told. Who the American people were told were a threat to our existence. I'm looking at these Iraqi soldiers and I'm like, how the fuck were these guys ever going to threaten anybody? Like, Like one of the first ones I actually saw was a dude that was shot through the hand and through the head because when they were arguing about when to surrender, him and his compatriots, I guess there was a problem about who wanted to surrender first, and so he obviously had the bad plan because his buddy shot him, right? Like, so he held his hand up to not get shot, and he got shot anyway. And I'm like, these are the people that were threatening the safety and security of the United States. That's and then the narrative just starts to deteriorate from there as you go forward, man.
Hey, Scott, maybe this is too deep of a rabbit hole, so maybe let's just get your quick opinion on it, because we definitely want to get we want to talk about the intel leak before you got to go. But obviously our foreign policy apparatus was hell-bent for leather on at some point, whether it was going to be the Clinton administration and then it was the Bush. So all that whole milieu of people, right? They were going to invade Iraq at some point for some reason. Now, I probably say this with too much, more surety than I could probably back up, but it seems to me that a lot of these things are like, isn't it the case that Saddam was going to try to start selling oil outside of the petrodollar? Isn't that part of this? Wasn't that part of the like Wolfowitz thing? It was just like, hey, we're going to get all of these countries are going to be selling oil and using the US dollar as the vehicle for that. Is this part of this? Or why do you, if not that, then why do you think they were so hell bent on? It's not just that they're bloodthirsty psychopaths, right? This is in service of some greater thing.
Well, with Iraq, it's actually, I've heard all that, and I'm not saying that those aren't true, and I'm not saying that some people that were influenced like that, but Iraq, it's actually very, very simple. George Herbert Walker Bush, Papa, in October of 1990, in a meeting in Dallas, Texas, with Republican fundraisers, called Saddam Hussein, who prior to that, in the years prior, was our ally. We were providing them with intelligence. I mean, one of the weirdest things was meeting General Wafik Samurai. He was head of Iraqi military intelligence, and he had defected, so I'm debriefing him. And he's talking about how in the 1980s, CIA teams were coming in, DOD teams were coming in and sharing sensitive U.S. intelligence on Iranian force dispositions. And he was bragging about the relationships he's had. And I'm like, how could we go to war against people we're providing this? I mean, literally in 1988, we're providing them with sensitive intelligence. And in 1990, we're getting ready to go to war. It just was mind-boggling to me. But Papa Bush, because he didn't want to explain to the American people that this war is really about oil, because that's what it was about. When Saddam first went into Kuwait back in 1990, we were going to actually let him do it if he just stuck with taking the oil fields on the border and Bubiyan Island. If he had just done that, we were going to tell the Kuwaitis, so sad, too bad to be you. Shouldn't have slant drilled, shouldn't have threatened them. That's the price of it. But when he moved through Kuwait and threatened the eastern Saudi oil fields, suddenly he was in a position where he was going to leverage much of the world's oil production, and we couldn't let him do that. But Bush tried it early on. He was talking about how we're doing, this is about protecting oil, and that didn't go over well. A lot of people forget that in the lead up to Desert Storm, the American people this wasn't post 9/11. This was post Vietnam. The American people weren't buying into this war, and they weren't going to buy into war about oil. So what he did is he said that Saddam Hussein was the Middle East equivalent of Adolf Hitler, who required Nuremberg-like retribution. And once an American president commits to that, you can't back away from that. You can't back away from calling somebody Hitler. And so it was always going to be that we had to remove Saddam Hussein from power, simply because we couldn't. And to show you how ridiculous this is, in 1993, after Clinton had won the election, but before he was inaugurated, I was leading the team into Iraq, and I was talking to the Iraqi oil minister, and he was laughing at me because I was a cocky son of a gun. I'm leading the UN. He had to be cocky. I had to be like the alpha dog, because if you weren't, fear around the Iraqis is like blood around a shark. So when I walked into Iraq, I was all at it. And so he's looking at me going, "Your day's over, Ritter. You're done." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "We're already in contact with the Clinton administration. We're negotiating. Sanctions are going to be lifted. This whole nonsense is over. We're done." And he was telling the truth. There were teams in Jordan negotiating with the Iraqis how to bring this whole thing to an end. And I'm like, okay. I wasn't the only one who was going, okay. The Bush administration, George Herbert Walker Bush, said, but we can't let this happen. So they cooked up a scheme with the Kuwaitis to do an attempted assassination on George Herbert Walker Bush. He visited Kuwait City, I think, in April. And it was a fake. I can say this because I've been in the Iraqi intelligence service. I've looked at the unit they're supposed to be doing. I've gone through their files. There's nothing. The Iraqis weren't trying to kill this guy, didn't want to kill this guy, but it was made up to force Bill Clinton to stop the negotiations and instead launch a cruise missile attack against the Iraqi intelligence service that cemented Bill Clinton now into this. And then in 1995, 96, Bill Clinton buys into the CIA's plan to assassinate and overthrow Saddam using my inspection team to orchestrate a coup, the whole thing. Clinton bought into it. By the time he left, he'd signed off on the Iraq Liberation Act, which made it the official policy of the United States to overthrow Saddam Hussein. This had nothing to do with Saddam playing games with the oil market. This had everything to do with Papa Bush saying he's Hitler and Clinton having to got sucked into that trap. And now W. Bush comes in, Shrub, and Shrub says he tried to kill my father. Remember that? He tried to kill my father. That's why we invaded Iraq, ladies and gentlemen, because George W. Bush had a grudge against Saddam Hussein, who he believed tried to kill his father because his father called Saddam Hussein Adolf Hitler. That's as simple as it gets, and that's why we invaded Iraq.
Well, and at the end of the day, these guys are gangsters, you know. They're just bespoke gangsters that are playing it at the highest level possible.
Yeah.
All right, so that's amazing. Yeah, above your pay grade. That's an amazing story. I'm glad we got into that because I was not aware about a lot of that stuff. But while we have you, and before we run out of time, today was a pretty big day, or over the past few days, we've got this intel leak. They've now discovered that it's an Air National Guard member, an E3. So for people that don't know, it's a very low-ranking guy. He's a 21-year-old guy from the Air National Guard who apparently got his hands on. And when we start talking about what this intel is, it's fairly amazing to me to think that he would have that kind of access. But let's put that aside for a second. So he's got a bunch of information that's embarrassing to our current regime. It indicates that they have been what people like us already know because we are dealing with reality and not their rhetoric. But it's now revealing that their rhetoric has been a lot of lies about Ukraine, about casualty numbers, about us spying on our Ukrainian counterparts and all these other things. But interestingly, he got a hold of these documents and he put them in a Discord server with him and his goofy friends that are being painted as painted by the media right now as kind of pro-gun Christian white nationalist types. Go figure. So
sounds like everybody joins the military, but okay, moving on.
Yeah, right. But it seems to me, here's my thing, and maybe Cody can back me up on this. With our background in the handling of classified material, especially compartmentalized material, especially signals intelligence reporting and all that kind of stuff, we're talking about specific intel that's siloed off anyways. You know, the signals intelligence would be in a different batch than this other intelligence. It's very unlikely that this guardsman would have any access to that stuff by himself, you know. And then whether he actually organically got it himself or whether, you know, like as we're seeing in a lot of other instances in our current environment that federal agents are involved in the actual commissions of these crimes, who knows, right? But it seems fairly obvious to me that what they're going to use this for is to get to roll back more civil liberties, to violate people's rights. We're gonna experience more invasive censorship. We're gonna find some sort of the Resist Act or something else is going to get authorized. It'll be similar to the Patriot Act. It will be under the auspices of protecting us from ourselves. And the days of even conversations maybe like this, or certainly a lot of the things that you talk about. I mean, you're no stranger to being in their crosshairs. But what do you think about what I just laid out there?
I think the consequences are exactly what you're talking about, whether or not this was by design or, because you remember the Patriot Act when it was passed after 9/11, all it really consisted of was all the failed legislation that had been tried to get through Congress for restriction. All they did is take all that failed legislation, bring it together in one package and push it through, call it the Patriot Act, and people voted for it. They voted for the legislation that they denied earlier because it was a frontal assault on our constitutional rights. That's what the Patriot Act is. And I'm afraid that you're 100% correct that the fact that this data sat on a Discord server, in a Minecraft room or something of that nature, and then floated around, 4chan and Twitter and Telegram, they're going to say, well, we have to now go in and monitor the totality of this to make sure this never happens again. No, that's not what you need to do. What you need to do is make sure that an E3 who has been, why the heck is an E3 having access to the briefing documents of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Why is an Air National Guard unit, the 102nd Wing, Intelligence Wing, why do they have access to this? How did this happen? That's a question that should be asked.
Well, I would tell you how it happened. It's Aaron and I were talking about it beforehand, and this is just my swag at it, but it's information laundering. It's he's about to quit, but so I'm a prior military deception planner. I'm a prior information operations planner. Like you launder information through certain ways. So basically what Aaron and I were saying before we got cracking, we were talking about this, was like, look, we've been following your work for a while, Colonel McGregor. I mean, Aaron and I have been saying that the Ukraine's going to lose since fucking day one. We've been saying that Zelensky's a puppet since day one. I mean, we've lost Raider friends over this. One of them's hopefully listening to this as soon as it shows up tomorrow. But so sooner or later, the normies of America, your Mountain Dew swilling, commuting all the time Americans that think television is real, right? They need to be told that the Ukraine's going to lose, right? Like this information has to come out sooner rather than later. So I think what the twist of it is you now funnel it through a way, and that was, who knows, man, like, every plan has a pace plan, right? Like, basically funnel this information out in a way that it comes to the audience through a hateable target. So the normies, the blue anons are going to learn that, Biden and Austin and Miley and all these other dudes have been lying the entire time, right? But that's not going to be acceptable to their fucking brain housing group, all right? So what they're going to need to hear is the reason why they know this is that list of, I think that his buddy mentioned Waco and Ruby Ridge. Like somebody interviewed like one of this guy's buddies, and the guy mentioned like Waco and Ruby Ridge. So basically, like they're reorienting the American ire, like they're shifting fire from the on-call target of Russians who are about to win to these American service members, or like these American like right-wing folks that are now telling everybody the secrets of the administration, right? Like, I did hear Colonel McGregor say today that basically, he said there's been a bunch of people telling the truth about this, and he mentioned your name today. But he also said that, hey, like, those documents were classified, but I mean, they actually do tell, like, the noise is going to be, why the fuck did the E3 have them? Why does, like, all this nonsense, right? The signal is these people are lying directly to your fucking face.
Yes.
And I've got major problems with the United States military right now. I mean, Aaron, I think, has done a much better job of transmuting his experiences into like spiritual gold than I have, right? Like, I'm seriously, like, as far as I'm concerned, if you're active duty in the military right now, you're a fucking coward. Like, I don't even look at the fucking camera when I say that shit. Oh, I was going to ask you before this gets too squirrely, is all three of us are Marines here, right? We're different levels. Aaron's retired enlisted guy. You're an officer. I'm a chief warrant officer. So we've got the gamut covered, right? And we've got from the 80s, Aaron went in the 90s. I'm a late 90s into 2000s guy. So, I mean, we're it, bros. We've got the thing covered. Never have I ever, in the history of my fucking 23 years serving the DOD, heard a distinct definition of what a domestic threat to the Constitution is, nor where I could find it, nor who the approval authority is for who the identification of that threat is. They showed me all kinds of threats out in the fucking world, like the Taliban. Like, please, how the hell was the Taliban?
You heard Milley take a stab. You heard Milley taking a stab at it during congressional testimony. Kind of, he was saying that he's interested in finding out what this white rage is all about, and
Somebody asked his wife.
Not explicitly, but yeah, they've it seems to me that
bedroom.
when they need to, right? They needed us all. They needed guys like me and Cody to be willing to go be the executors of their foreign policy thing, right?
Right.
Now that we've gone and done that, though, we're now kind of a liability, right? Like guys like us are a liability now.
Well,
so they've got to kind of cast their spells in order to they're really going to have a problem if they keep lying like this and getting caught.
Yeah, because I already asked Aaron, and we had a Raider buddy here over the weekend. I think I asked him too. And so, did anybody ever explain to you what a domestic threat to the United States was? Right, like we've all seen it in The Rock. They're yelling at each other in the shower scene about, we all swore to defend this Constitution against domestic, all threats, foreign and domestic. So, have you ever, in your longer experience than us, talking to all these starred individuals, did anybody ever say, like, did ever come up in a conversation? Then I'll shut up. I'm sorry.
I've had the same conversation with people, and they don't have an answer, so I gave them the answer. Joe Biden's a domestic threat to the Constitution of the United States. Almost every member of Congress is a threat to a domestic threat. The deep state. I mean, I was at the 35th anniversary of the signing of the INF Treaty, and there was a reunion of all the old arms control people. They brought in a senior Biden administration arms control person, and we asked the question. We said, hey, Joe Biden ran on a platform of bringing in what we called the single purpose, sole purpose doctrine, which means our nuclear weapons only exist to deter other nations from using nuclear weapons against us, or if they use them, to retaliate in a manner which is punishing, which I believe is the only reason why we should have nuclear weapons. But right now we have a nuclear posture that says we can use nuclear weapons preemptively in a non-nuclear environment any way we dictate. So we're basically the global terrorist is what we've become. And Biden said he was going to do that, but he came in and he didn't do it. We said, why? He's the commander in chief. He can just simply order this done. And this person said, the interagency wasn't ready for this. Now, I've worked Washington, D.C. for a long time, and I know what the interagency process is. It's a process of coordination. But the way this was described is that it's no longer a process, it's an entity. It's the deep state. The interagency wasn't ready for it. So the interagency is a threat, a domestic threat to the Constitution. But here's the biggest one. The greatest domestic threat to the Constitution of the United States of America is the American people. How can you take an oath to uphold?
That's the best answer I've ever heard.
How can you take an oath to uphold and defend something you haven't read, you don't understand? Now, there's people out there who think they know what the Second Amendment is. They have an interpretation of it. But there's a lot of other amendments, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in the Constitution. The Constitution is a living document. It's a breathing document, and it's been interpreted through time. The whole concept of the Constitution is to help us create a more perfect union. So, that's a process. It's a growth process, and it requires we, the people of the United States of America, government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's who should be the greatest defenders of the Constitution. The defenders of the Constitution don't wear uniforms. The defenders of the Constitution are the American people because it belongs to us. It is our document, and yet we ignore it. We don't know it. We don't understand it. And then we pretend to, allocate responsibility to defend it to people who take an oath to what? How many people who have taken that oath actually went out and took the Constitution and said, damn, I better read this thing and find out what it is. I just took an oath to uphold and defend. How can you defend something you don't know? So the greatest threat to the Constitution domestically are the people who are supposed to know it, who don't know it, who then subordinate or give responsibility to defend the Constitution to people who are now armed and empowered, but they don't know the Constitution. So they're going to be called upon to do things like enforce. Department of Homeland Security, with all due respect to every badge carrying member there, you are the Gestapo. You are an enemy of America. You don't belong in my country. I don't need you. I don't want a homeland. I want a country. I want a nation. I want a home, but not a homeland. I don't need a department that secures my homeland. We don't need it. It's the FBI is a literal criminal organization. It has been from the day it was created with J. Edgar Hoover. It hasn't changed. I was FBI guy. I know them very well. I've worked with them. They're thugs with badges. That's all they are. And we've militarized the police. The cops used to be, Mr. Friendly. Now I understand cops have always had a tough job to do. And, I've watched The Untouchables and I saw Sean Connery's character and, okay, cops are tough and they have a tough job and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, cops are about policing the community. They're of the community. They're part of the community. And yet what we've done now is we've militarized them. They now dress like they're stormtroopers and SWAT troopers. And they approach every problem as if they're the enemy. If a guy with a badge has a gun and he's so scared that he has to pull the gun, then he doesn't deserve that badge. Okay, you are a peacemaker, a peacekeeper. You are not a SWAT team. You are not an assault force. You aren't here. We are not the enemy. We are America. And your job is to secure us, not to contain us. So I think the United States has lost touch with the Constitution. The greatest threat to this domestic threat to the Constitution of the United States of America is we, the people of the United States, because we don't know it, we don't respect it. Therefore, we're not going to demand that it be implemented properly.
I agree.
That's a great answer.
I'd agree, and I'd add one thing to that. It's also the problem with Americans and their discernment. So, let's take Ukraine. Okay, Americans view everything as if it's a Marvel movie now. So they watch. Okay, I'll just give you an example. So Sean Penn, who's an actor, flies to Ukraine, and he meets with Zelensky, who's an actor, and he gives Zelensky an Oscar, which is an award for acting. And the American people see this, and it doesn't trip any alarms for them. Reality itself is trying to communicate with you, and you're still like, Russia bad, we're the good guys. It's like, no, they just showed you. Watch it. Watch what just happened. It's not real. They're creating a narrative for you to, just so that you chew your cud and, figure that, like you said, someone else is handling it. I can go back to my phone or whatever I'm into, we've abdicated our responsibility to for everything. We're literally just sitting in our pens waiting to be fed. And it's kind of like we're, how much can we really complain? Like, we're fired up, we're paying attention, but we need everybody to kind of be like, all right, what is going on? Why are things the way they are? And people, you might get this all the time where you kind of try to go down this road with people and they just kind of look at you like, uh-oh.
It's too much work. It's too much. Being a good citizen is just too. I'll give you an example. Cody, go ahead and say. I know you want to say something, so I'm not going to cut you off.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. You're the reason why we're on here, and it just fell out of my TBI hole, so it's fine. Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
You're the reason why I'm here, because you're Marines, and I'll do anything for Marines. But look, in the lead up to the Iraq War, I'm an all-American guy. I'm as simple as the next person, and I like going to Monday Night Football. I like going to a bar. I like having wings. I like ordering a beer and sitting with my friends and watching the game. And so I do that. And I had just come back from Iraq from briefing the Parliament, and now we're in the football season, and they're all looking at me like, "Dude, you were just in Iraq. This is weird." I was a volunteer firefighter at the time too, and believe my fellow firefighters like, I don't know. We go on a call with you, but then you end up on TV doing the stuff we don't understand. I said, guys, I am literally just like you. I am as humble, and I just want to serve my community like you do. So we're sitting there watching the football game, and I sort of held them to task. I was like, there's a war getting ready to be fought here, and you guys might want to become more engaged before we send. You guys keep telling me, hey, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Don't thank me for my service. Do right by me, do right by the people in uniform, making sure that that there's a reason why we're going to war, that the war is worthy of the sacrifice you're asking me to make. They're like, well, Scott, be fair, man. We have jobs. We have life. We get up in the morning, we go to work, we come home. We don't have time. You do this full time. And that resonated with me. I was like, okay, I understand that. Then the game gets on. They all play fantasy football. And they know every stat of every player, of everything. I mean, these guys are throwing off numbers and all that. They're calculating, they're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, how the hell do you know all this? I said, oh, no, we do the research. And going in, I said, so basically, you're telling me that fantasy football is more important to you than the life of your average Marine, because you're willing to sacrifice all this time into learning fantasy football so you can be entertained on a Monday night, and you're not willing to look into why we're getting ready to go to war going to cost the lives of your fellow American service members, the guys that you put the stupid yellow sticker on your car saying you support the troops. You don't support the troops. And at that point in time, I was either going to get in a fist fight with my friends or stop the conversation and maintain friendship. So we stopped the conversation. But see, God's honest truth, American people are the laziest citizens in the history of the world. We just don't want to know about things. We dumb ourselves down on purpose.
Yeah, I agree. Cody, did you ever remember what you had cooking?
No, but that basically bleeds over into everything. You know, I mean, I wonder how many of those football fans would be fans of the same team. I'm understanding that like that team has never won. I mean, when people look at the Department of Defense, there's all these, you know, you see Miley up there with a chest full of medals and shit. You're like, bro, you've never won. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw someone.
I'm sorry. I remember what it was.
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
One of the reasons why that got me to quit, right, was like after the Afghan thing. And I guess this should be a quick aside, is I was shocked that nobody wanted to talk about it. Like Aaron and I worked at a command in the G shop, right? We worked in the G39. So like the 2-stars fishbowl, it's just a couple of doors down the hall, you know, like I thought after Afghanistan fell, that whole debacle, like, and this will lead me to a point now that I recall it, is that hey, the old man was going to come down, says, like, we're all Afghan veterans. I thought he was going to bring all the Raiders into the auditorium and be like, all right, boys, you know, we had a long slog. You know, I know everybody here has lost multiple friends, and some people in that building have lost legs. You know, we got active duty buddies with a kickstand because they lose a leg and they come back to work, you know, like, so dudes in the building have lost limbs to the thing. I thought there was going to be something to the people in the building to say, hey, that was what it was. You know, we are, you know, we're active duty Marines, you know, we're not about the politics. I thought we were going to get that speech, right? It was like quiet, like you could hear a fucking cricket, right? And then so guys like me who are mouthy and shit, I start poking people. I'm like, hey, you know, are we going to talk about this? Are we going to have like how did this happen? Are we going to identify the connecting file to wherever the failure was so we don't do this again? And the complete answer was no. And so I back to Aaron, asked him a couple days ago or something like that, like, hey man, like amongst the fellas, you know, are kind of circling back to Ukraine, you know, we understand the tactics that Russia's using, right? It is what it is. Is the Marine Corps at that level? You know, Aaron is at a very fucking sharp tip of the spear of the Marine Corps. Are they discussing how they're going to deal with eating like 7,000 artillery rounds? You know, like how are you gonna fire a maneuver in an ISR strike enabled enemy? And so Aaron's like, yeah, nah. And I'm like,
no.
Okay,
nah.
I'm like, it's and I guess people just aren't aware of that. I guess to tie a bow on this, they aren't aware of this because I get the impression that since so few people have served in the military, they feel like they don't have the ability to really question people in the military and take them to task. You know? So when they see a general standing behind a podium, they see the fruit salad, like we're like gang members. We can look at his fruit salad and be like, oh, this guy's a fucking desk jockey, right? Like, you know, but whatever. But civilians can't do that, right? You're
gonna look at me and go, yeah, desk jockey.
It's so maybe that's what the wall is like no American feels like they can take this guy to task, take any of these people to task, right? And then so you flip it, and then you get guys that get out of the military, and for some reason finding a guy that gets out of the military who's willing to actually take the military to task is almost 0 to none. There's Colonel McGregor, there's like, I mean, I've listened to several other veteran podcasts, and none of them are like, hey boys, it's time to have a fucking talk. Like, we're civilians. You guys in the military work for us. I know that gets people a little weird, right? Because when we were military, the last thing I would have wanted to hear that some fucking civilian has something to say. But I've got more combat experience than almost everybody in the military right now. You got to be in fucking tier 1 to like have stories as good as me and Aaron these days. Like, so I'm like, if not us, who? And if not now, when? Like, who the fuck is going to start like, you have the pedigree to ask these people, and you do.
Well, I've done it. I mean, but here's the thing. This, and again, I don't want to piss you guys off, so just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Don't come through the screen at me. But when this war started, I had active connectivity with Rangers, with some Delta guys, and all that. And they're just talking up a whole load of crap about this war and how bad the Russians are. And I'm like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Well, I was in Afghanistan. I was in Iraq. I said, yeah, low intensity conflict, dude.
That was squad on squad combat.
Yeah, you never did. You never did what's happening right now.
No.
Okay.
Oh, you're not going to piss us off. We know.
And so I basically told him, I said, if you haven't done a schedule of fires for 2 or 3 battalions at the same time in a maneuver warfare concept, shut the bet up. I don't want to talk to you. I don't care about your experience. I don't care how many V's you have on, whatever ribbons are up here. You don't know what you're dealing with. And this is what General Cavoli, commander of U.S. forces in Europe, finally had to admit in front of a Swedish defense forum in January. He said the scope and scale of the violence taking place in Europe is beyond the imagination. Beyond the imagination. And that's the thing. All these special operations guys, and I respect the hell out of them. I mean, I've worked with them. I think they're awesome. But this ain't special operations war. This is old school, getting the crap knocked out of you war. This is 20,000 rounds of artillery impacting you on a daily basis. This is, the kind of electronic warfare. That was the other thing, too. I'm like, really, you special operators, when was the last time you had everything jammed and nothing worked?
Well,
no, you guys operate in the perfect world. You know?
Yeah, so I'll reinforce what you're saying first, so I don't forget it. The jamming thing, right? So I did 3 tours at the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force Iraq. Looking at the Syria problem set, all that shit when the Russians went in there. You want to see a colonel act like a 5-year-old girl with a skin knee? Start jamming his fucking GPS. Start letting him know that they don't do command orders anymore. They need to know where every single dude is at all times, or they basically can't operate. You literally cannot get a concept of operations, a CONOP approved to get out the door if your SATCOM's not up. It's called pregame. Like you call up to the commander, you're like, hey, the brevity code's pregame. We're in pregame, which means we're getting all of our beeps and boops up, like all of our SATCOM up, and we can't go to kickoff. We can't go from pregame to kickoff until the RG is talking through outer space to the commander, like that is an impossibility to fucking fight a war like that. And then, so if there's any soft guy out there beating their chest, let's just get real about something for a second, soft guys. Let's look at your standard Afghanistan tick. All right. But before everybody gets all their fucking panties in a bunch. Right. So once this massive CONOP got approved, right, all the SATCOM, right, we had air stacked up to Jesus, right, we had everything you require to roll out of the fucking wire to fight what would typically turn out to be a 5 to 7 man Taliban element.
Yeah, 2 RPGs, 1 RPK.
Oh, right, I was going to go through the TO and the TE here, right? So our TO is 27-year-olds and above, the best trained dudes you could get your hands on. With our table of equipment is the most expensive shit you can ever launder money for. And the enemy is 5 to 7 dudes that are anywhere from 15 to like 21, 0 fucking combat training. They've got AK-47s with iron sights, probably 3 mags apiece. If they're lucky, there's a PKM, a mortar, and an RPG in the mix, maybe a SPIG. These dudes would fight us to a standstill. We would Winchester B1s, on these motherfuckers. Like, we would be there for days, and it would be some Vietnam shit. At the end, we'd be like, oh man, we must have been fighting fucking hundreds of them. And then like the Long War Journal or something like that would come out and be like, yeah, you guys killed 6 of them in a trench. And they fought a special operations platoon or an MSOT or whatever it was to a standstill, so that's the reality. And
we have no ability to assume risk, really. So, and again, any casualty is a tragedy, of course, especially if it's a friend of yours. But man, we're looking at whole Ukrainian orders of battle wiped off the earth. We lose 3 guys in one engagement, and dudes talk about it for 6 months. You know what I mean? Like in Afghanistan, handfuls of guys getting hurt or killed here and there, but that's
it might hurt folks' feelings. But there was an operation that went down in Iraq on this place called Canis Island in the fucking river, in the Euphrates. It's an island in the Euphrates, man. Okay, whatever. So a Iraqi, whatever they were, ERD or whatever, advised and assisted by an MSOT, a Marine Special Operations Team, moves onto the island. This should not be a massive combat operation, at a danger area, like a linear danger area, a trail of some sort. They take fire. Go figure. Taking fire at a linear danger area. Who'd have thought it, right? Like, that's why you do like box recons and shit. I don't know. I wasn't there. But basically, the team chief gets smoked, the interpreter gets smoked, and the EOD tech gets shot through the legs and ass. They abandon the island. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't understand what just happened. So you took a casualty and you
ran.
And you abandoned the whole fucking island. And then what that fast forwarded to was that Siege of Soto commander, like, sending a sortie of like 35 or some ridiculous number of F-35s, bomb that fucking island with, like, I think it was like 30 some odd GBUs, to which they got a rowboat that Methuselah could have left there, and like 5 pieces of ordnance. And they said, like, Fox News says that ISIS was obliterated on that island. And now they want to go fight Russia.
Well,
I'm like,
I think they'd rather have Ukraine do it.
Well, Ukraine's trying. I mean, I'll give the Ukrainians. I'll give the Ukrainians this. I mean, you can't say what you want about them, and I don't think highly of their politics. I'm not a big Bandera fan. I'm not a fan of Nazi ideology or symbology. But
no,
Yevgeny Prigozhin, the civilian head of Wagner, he speaks nothing but in the highest terms about the Ukrainians that they fight in Bakhmut. He speaks of their courage, their tenacity, their professionalism. I mean, that's what we don't understand, is this is a war being fought by 2 well-equipped, well-trained, well-motivated. I really pissed off. Excuse my language. I apologize. When people
all First Amendment,
when they denigrate either side. I mean, on the one hand, because Ukrainians are suffering so many casualties, people are like, oh, they can't fight. Dude, you have no clue what they're going through. All right, they're going against the Russian military that can throw out 20 to 60,000 rounds of artillery a day. You have no clue what that's like. You've never gone through anything remotely like this. And then the Russians, well, they can't fight. Guys, they are doing things that you can't even imagine. I mean, you were in Fallujah, and that was heavy. I'm not putting that down. You were in heavy urban fighting.
I'll be the first one to say that's why I went on that earlier tirade. Even Fallujah, we surrounded Fallujah. We had numbers: 3rd Battalion 3-1, 1-3, 3-5, 1-8. The Army's 2-2 cavalry.
Well, you want like a 6-to-1 ratio for an urban assault, right? You had to like an appropriate amount of people for an assault, right?
Yeah. So we had that amount of firepower going into Fallujah, man, and they still fought us to a standstill on several days.
Yeah.
I mean,
because look, urban combat is
hard.
Yeah. I respect all these. The individual fighting man, of course, gets my respect no matter what.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too. I did hear that Prigozhin was saying that about the Ukrainian troops, and that's something that we never had the respect to say for. Well, I've said it before, but like the Taliban and the Iraqis and shit, yeah,
I've said it's it's sad because these guys, we're talking about what amounts to guys who are, aside from the Nazi ideology, which that's just something that gets installed in them. These are people from the same part of the world. This is another brother war. It's another brother war fought on behalf of, frankly, psychopaths that don't. The fact that anybody involved in this thing, it's like they don't have this thing in them that says, hey, look, whatever we got to do to stop hundreds of thousands of men from turning each other into flesh confetti, that's what we got to do. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have that though. I
thought we were all about saving lives over the last 3 years.
It's pretty crazy. And then, you if you go around like with an anti-war perspective these days, people accuse you of complicity with Russia or like, what's your problem? And it's like, no, just calm down and listen to what I'm saying. I'm just saying that war is the absolute worst outcome for anybody ever. Yeah. And it's pretty obvious, right?
Well, it's the same thing. I was called when I went to the Iraqi parliament to intervene to try and get the inspectors back in, I was Saddam's shill. I was a paid agent of Saddam. And I'm like, you guys have no clue what you're talking about. I mean, not only did I go to war against these guys, but for 7 years, I was Abu Azamat, the father of all crises. There was no one that would say that I was Saddam's shill. Just because I want to go the extra mile to stop a war that doesn't need to be fought from being fought doesn't mean that I'm suddenly in the service of Saddam. It means I'm in the service of my country. That means I'm trying to do what the people who have the pay grade should be doing, to do everything necessary to resolve the problem before we go to war. That war should be the absolute last option.
Agreed.
We're getting a little bit long in the teeth, but
Yeah,
so
we'll get-
maybe as a little closer, and this will just be a shout out for Ski, I guess, is that can you explain or maybe just kind of wrap up for us? You know, Aaron and I were kids during the Cold War, right? Essentially. So we grew up knowing who the Soviets were. We were concerned about the Soviets. I pretty much joined the military because of G.I. Joe and Red Dawn. But at a certain point, 89-ish, the Soviets collapsed, right? And so what transferred from Warsaw Pact, which if you were to ask some young devil dog now who the Warsaw Pact was, I mean, good luck with that shit. So you know, all those countries went away, and then there was Russia. So then fast forward, and the war on terror starts, and I'm like, okay, like, and I think Russia even said that they would help out. If maybe you can clarify it for us. But at that time, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, cool. You know, I remember being a kid and like the whole perestroika. I remember seeing, you know, Red Heat with Schwarzenegger and whatever that fucking comedian's brother's name was, man. Like, I was under the impression that we were not necessarily allies with the Russians anymore with the Russians, but then it was like, hey, you know, you got in a fight one day with a bully, and then later on you guys figured out you weren't that different. And then, so I figured that's where we were at with Russia, and they're fighting Muslim extremists with like the Breslin school. The name, I might mess that name up.
Yeah, in Beslan, yeah.
Beslan, yeah. I'm like, okay, so they've got a Muslim extremist problem. I'm fighting Muslim extremists. Like, I thought it was a natural fit that us and Russia would be friends. I mean, we were friends before the Bolshevik bullshit. You know, like, can you explain to people maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean,
why we're not friends with Russia?
Well,
maybe that's a dumb
it's
question.
as simple as this, because we won the Cold War. You see, we're not allowed to actually respect history. We're not allowed to respect reality. We're a black and white society, and we had painted for many years during the Cold War that this was the evil empire, that the Soviets are bad. Look, I'm a child of the Cold War. That's why I joined the Marine Corps, is to close with to destroy the Soviet enemy through firepower maneuver. And suddenly Gorbachev comes in, Perestroika comes in, INF inspections, START inspections, we're cooperating. We're no longer enemy. You know, the reason why we're able to do Desert Storm is because the Soviets were on our side. The Soviets said, we support this. They didn't veto a Chapter 7 resolution like they used to. So we're working in a cooperative fashion. And then the Soviet Union goes away. And instead of figuring out how we could help Russia recover from this, we wanted to destroy Russia. The policy of the United States wasn't to help Russia. The policy of the United States was to keep Russia down, help dismember Russia, so that Russia could never again rise up and represent a threat on the level of the Soviet problem. We never wanted that again. And so we went into Russia. This is where people like Michael McFaul and others cut their teeth. They didn't cut their teeth as genuine Russian experts. They were Russian exploiters. They went into Russia like carpetbaggers. They sought to steal the wealth of Russia by empowering oligarchs to take over enterprises and then strip the wealth of Russia out. The decade of the 1990s was a nightmare for the average Russian. We're talking about people that were starving to death. Their system had collapsed. There was no structure. The government was as corrupt as the day is long. The United States was in there. So, you know, you talk about the Russians were fighting Chechens. You know what the CIA was doing with the Chechens? The CIA was supporting the Chechens. They were sending material support to the Chechens for the purpose of getting. Pardon?
Oh, I said shocker.
Yeah, the idea was to get Chechnya to break away from Russia and trigger a similar breakdown of the rest of the constituent republics of the Russian Federation, to break Russia into smaller parts so that Russia couldn't take advantage of the landmass and the resources. This was the strategic objective of the United States in the 1990s. We talked about the Russians interfering in the 2016 election. I would invite every American to look at the 1996 election in Russia. Time magazine brags about how we stole it, the best election money can buy. We went in and stole an election on behalf of Boris Yeltsin, who was our servant, the man who did everything we asked him to do, destroy Russian power. So now 1999 comes up. Boris Yeltsin is a sclerotic alcoholic who realizes that he can't stay in power. He's surrounded by wolves who are literally waiting for him to step aside so they can rip Russia apart. And he picks one man that nobody expected to be his replacement, a guy named Vladimir Putin. And I've studied Putin as long as the day is, I know him pretty well. He's not corrupt. He's a hardliner in terms of Russian nationalism. He believes in Russia. He wants Russia to succeed. He didn't want the job as president. When he was first offered, he said, "I'm not the man for the job. I don't want the job." And Yeltsin said, "That's why you have to take the job." And so he became president. And what was his greatest sin? Get Russia to stand up back on its feet again. You take a look at the 24 years that Putin's been in power right now, since 1999 till today, and you take a look at what Russia was in 1999, this decrepit, collapsed nation state with an economy that was no government that was corrupt. There was no democracy. It was basically a playland for the United States and Europe to come in and steal money. And you take a look at what Russia is today, one of the most economically advanced nations. They're kicking our butts. We tried to sanction them, and they flipped the script. They're doing well. The ruble's not rubble. How did that happen? One man, Vladimir Putin. Look at their military. The military that existed in 1999 was a shadow of what the Soviet military was. Underpaid, under-equipped, poorly trained, etc. Look at the Russian military today. It'll stand toe-to-toe with any military in the world, and it will do very well. You take a look at every aspect of the Russians. These are smart people because they have good education. These are healthy people because they have a good healthcare system. These are people with good infrastructure because they invest in their infrastructure. All the things that we claim we want done here in America is being done in Russia because of one man, Vladimir Putin. We can't accept this. This is why we denigrate the man. This is why we target the man. People are going to say, well, Scott, you're pro-Putin. Well, no, I'm pro-America. But America needs Vladimir Putin in Russia because America needs Russia to be what it is today, a strong, healthy nation that, believe it or not, is still willing to work with us to achieve global peace and prosperity. But we're the ones who picked the fight. We're the ones who went in 2008 and expanded NATO to include Ukraine, knowing that this would precipitate a conflict. We were warned by William Burns, the current director of the CIA, former U.S. ambassador. He said, don't invite Ukraine because this will eventually cause a military intervention. We knew what we were doing when we did it. We fostered a coup d'etat in 2014. We trained a Ukrainian army for the sole purpose of attacking the ethnic Russians in the Donbass. We allowed them for 8 years to bombard these people, killing thousands, including hundreds of children. And then we screamed bloody murder when Vladimir Putin stood up and did the right thing, which is to intervene and stop this nonsense after trying for 8 years to have a peaceful negotiation with the Minsk Accords, which we now the West viewed as a sham. But we can't accept this, because to accept this, we'd have to accept the reality that we're wrong. And we can't admit that we've been wrong. We'd have to accept that NATO has no legitimate purpose to exist. Why does NATO exist? NATO can only exist if you have a threat. And so we've manufactured a Russian threat. I am doing I talked about what I was doing, going to the Iraqi parliament. Later this month, I'm going to Russia. And the purpose of my trip to Russia is to try and build bridges and to try and re-engage a dialogue with the Russian people so that the Americans can empower themselves with knowledge and information. I'm not sitting here telling you that Russia's perfect. And I'm not saying that you're going to accept at face value everything that Russia's about. But what I am going to tell you is that Russia's not a threat worthy of war, that we can peacefully coexist with the Russians. But America is infected with the disease of Russophobia. All the people that say anything about Putin, challenge them straight up to tell you something about Putin, something factual about Putin. If they want to talk about how he's a dictator, ask him what the percentage he won the 2011 or 2012 election by, and then compare and contrast it with percentage that an American president wins by, and you'll see that the level of democracy in Russia is the same as America, meaning that about 40%, 45% of the population didn't vote for Putin. Now, what kind of dictator allows 45% of the people say, we don't want you to be our president? The last dictator that I was familiar with was Saddam Hussein, and he won elections by 99%. You know?
Yeah, I mean, anybody would say that nonsense. You just point to like the essentially dynasty that's been in our White House. I mean, so you've got old Bush, right? Okay, cool. That's a fucking CIA guy. You can see him with Clinton. Like, and here's my assessment, man. Clinton is one of Bush's fucking agents. Whatever. Like, okay, so that nonsense goes through, and then you get who the fuck was that there? Then regular Bush, right? So, okay, so now we're back with the Bush family again. So now we have American aristocracy. We got a family with, what, 3 tours in the fucking White House? More than that, because Bush was actually the vice president for Reagan. So then you get Obama, which is, okay, that's a fucking construct, but Biden's his vice president. So he's in there for 8 years. Now Biden's in there for another. So, well, we've had like the same 5, 6 people for like the last 30 years. And like we're calling, and they're all connected. Like, and we're calling other people dictators. It's kind of a joke.
Well, we also have a, $800, nearly $900 billion defense budget. I mean, and I don't
which they frequently can't find trillions of dollars of.
They can't find the money. But right. my point is this, that when I talked about the INF Treaty, I at the beginning, I talked about the threat global to humanity that nuclear weapons pose. And I don't think the American people get it. So I'm going to say it straight up. If we don't make good with the Russians, if we don't re-energize arms control, we're not going to survive the decade. Do people understand that we are in a nuclear arms race with Russia as we speak, and that Russia's winning this arms race, and that we are posturing ourselves in an aggressive manner, which is going to trigger the notion that we can do a preemptive nuclear strike, or there can be a limited nuclear war, that we can escalate to de-escalate. There's a lot of talk about a demonstration nuclear device, etc. We're the only nation that has weaponized a usable nuclear weapon. W76-2 low yield nuclear warhead that we put on a Trident missile on a Ohio class submarine. And then in 2020, Mark Espers, the Secretary of Defense, actually participated in a war game at Strategic Command where he fired, simulated giving the launch orders of one of these missiles against a Russian target. Meaning normally when you have war games, you're fighting against East Carpathia or Orange.
Yeah.
This was against Russia. And my point is, the Russians have made it clear, if you use one nuclear weapon against us, we fire everything. And they're serious about it. So I don't think people understand the stupidity of successive administrations that ignore the threat that comes from Russia, not because Russia is inherently a threat, but we're making them a threat because we're backing them into a corner. And there's going to be a nuclear war if we don't get arms control back on the agenda. That's why it's my number one objective right now, is to get Americans to say, we need arms control. All the other things that you're worried about in life, that can wait. Because if we don't get arms control, none of these other things are going to matter, because we're all going to get the 5 million degree suntan, when the thing goes flash and it's over. And by that time, it's too late. If the last thought through your head is, oh, I should have, boom, too late. You should do it right now. Right now is about stopping this insanity about the Russophobia, stopping this anti-Russian nonsense. And I'm not talking about surrendering. I'm talking about simply doing the right thing. We did it once before with a president that nobody would accuse of being soft on Russia. Ronald Reagan was the ultimate Cold Warrior. But Ronald Reagan recognized if we continued down the path that we were heading, we wouldn't be here. So he signed a treaty that literally saved everybody's lives. I always tell people, when you meet me, shake my hand and buy me a beer, because I saved your life. Me and all the other inspectors that implemented the INF Treaty. And they go, well, what do you mean by that? And I give them an example. I say in June 1995, the Norwegians fired an atmosphere's text rocket, and it was picked up by Russian radar. And the Russian radar interpreted it as a Trident missile launch coming in on what they deemed to be a EMP arc, meaning it was going to come in and do a air burst, electromagnetic pulse, shut down the radars for the next wave in. They brought the nuclear football out. They brought that damn nuclear football out, opened it up at Fort Yeltsin, and all of his guys said, launch. launch now. We have to because it's coming in. If the INF treaty hadn't been signed, Yeltsin's window of decision would have been 7 to 12 minutes. All right. But because the INF treaty had been implemented, there were no INF weapons. He had 30 to 40 minutes.
Damn, that's crazy.
48-minute mark, Yeltsin received the information that it was a false alarm. He was getting ready to push the button that would have ended all life on planet Earth. But he received, now, if we didn't have the INF treaty, he would have pushed that button at around the 11th minute and we'd all be dead. This is real. This ain't fake. This is our future, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting ready to deploy something called Dark Eagle into Germany, which is a hypersonic intermediate range system that shortens the flight time to about 5 to 7 minutes. So that means any mistake in the future, and there will be mistakes because that's all we do as humans is make mistakes. Any mistake means the Russians will have to act instantly, and then we're all dead. So why don't we knock this nonsense off, quit supporting this idiot Zelensky, quit supporting this neo-Nazi ideology, and start focusing on that which is important. Not surrendering to Russia, but working with Russia to get arms control back on the table, stop this arms race, to lower the threshold of nuclear conflict so we can then work together to solve the myriad of real problems that face us. But none of these problems matter if we all disappear.
Amen to that. That's great. I mean, it's terrible, but I'm glad you're working on it. Well, Scott, I appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. I wish you all the best in those endeavors for sure. Got a lot to think about. I guess I kind of have my own cognitive dissonance where I don't focus on the looming nuclear threat as much as I probably ought to be thinking about it. So thanks for highlighting that.
Well, I guess to close it out is so Aaron and I bought a farm together, and I know other veterans follow you, and you can use all this material for whatever you'd like. But I would propose this to other veterans, like, look, folks, going back to what Scott said about Americans are the fucking problem. I agree with that, right? Because we all basically allowed ourselves to be, turned into domesticated tax animals, essentially, right? So Aaron and I bought a 52-acre farm together. It makes sense because we're both military guys. We have wake up money, right? So for other veterans out there, I would say, if you're tired of the 9-to-5 slog and, you got some disability money, you got a little retirement money. Hey, you're used to spending time with 3 or 4 of your friends at some weird fob somewhere, creating a way of life together in Afghanistan. Well, do it again here in America. There's farmland all over the place that Bill Gates hasn't bought yet. Like, collect up groups of veterans, go out and make America great again yourself with your own hands, man. Like, we are going to be the ones to fix this. No politician's going to fix this. No elected official, no idiot in a fucking uniform is going to fix this. It's going to take Americans taking responsibility for themselves and their neighbors and moving essentially away from these death cities into back into the countryside and doing the things that made America great. Have 7 kids, make sure they all know how to farm, man. I can't think of a better way to defend your nation than every single acre of it is covered in farms with beautiful families who are, creating their own food. How do you destroy how do you destroy a logistic pipeline when every single family is creating their own food? I mean, you're not going to fight your way through that, especially if we all have guns. So, basically that was a way that's kind of what we're pushing, folks, is get out of the system, right? We call it goots. Go back to Little House on the Prairie style, man, because, if Scott's right and this thing does go sideways, we're not all going to die. There's going to be survivors, but it ain't going to be if you're next to a city. You might want to get out in the middle of nowhere and start farming. That's what I got for the end of it. Aaron, you're muted.
Well, thanks again, Scott. We really appreciate it, and lots of luck in all your endeavors.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure. And if you guys ever wanted to do it again, maybe when I come back, we can talk about the trip and
love to.
This conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, man. Thank you so much. And hey, safe travels, man.
All right.
That's a
all right. Yeah. Take care of yourself.
Trip.
All right. Well, Semper Fi, guys. Thanks.
All right, buddy.
Semper
Yeah.
Fi.
Semper Fi.